Hey there, dear listeners. Welcome back to our podcast, where we dive into the fascinating world of international travel and cultural exploration. I'm Mira, and I'm super to be here with my trusty sidekick, Leo.
That's me, and I'm thrilled to be back on the mic with Mira. We've got an incredible show lined up for you today, so grab your favorite snack, sit back, and get ready for a wild ride.
So, what's been going on between our last podcast and this one? Well, let me tell you, Leo, he got into a bit of trouble. He tried to improve our podcast sound effects by adding some creative music to the background. Let's just say it was a unique experience.
Yeah, I might have gotten a bit carried away with the sound design, but hey, at least it added some character to the podcast, right? And who needs boring old background music when you can have a funky mix of cat meows and disco beats?
Oh, Leo, you're such a card. But seriously, we had a good laugh about it, and it's all good now. We're back to our usual selves, ready to bring you another fantastic episode.
That's right. And today, we're super to introduce our topic of the day, a detailed comparison of two amazing countries, Estonia and Hungary. We'll be diving deep into the differences between these two fascinating nations. And we'll answer all your burning questions about which country is right for you.
That's right. Folks, whether you're considering a move to one of these countries, or you're just curious about the differences between them, we've got you covered. Our podcast is like a trusty map, guiding you through the twists and turns of international travel and cultural exploration.
And speaking of maps, we're powered by the fantastic folks at Jetoff AI, who help us navigate the complexities of international travel and make our podcast possible.
That's right. With Jetoff, AI's expertise and our own brand of humor, we'll take you on a wild journey through the world of Estonia and Hungary, from their history and culture to their food and nightlife. We'll cover it all.
So buckle up, folks, and get ready for a comprehensive guide to help you make informed decisions about which country is right for you. And remember, we're not just talking about visiting these countries, we're talking about living and experiencing them like a local.
That's right. And don't worry, we won't leave you hanging. We'll answer all your questions, from the simplest to the most complex, and provide you with a clear understanding of what to expect in each country.
And as always, we'll be bringing our own unique brand of humor and wit to the conversation. So, get ready to laugh, learn, and maybe even cry a little.
Don't worry, Leo, we'll try to keep the tears to a minimum. But seriously, folks, we're to share this journey with you. And we hope you'll join us on this wild adventure through the world of Estonia and Hungary.
That's right. So we think that we can cover that. So, without further ado, let's dive in and explore the fascinating world of Estonia and Hungary. It's going to be a wild ride, and we can't wait to share it with you.
I'm curious to know, Leo, what are your thoughts on Estonia's crime rate compared to Hungary's?
Well, Mira, I've done some research, and it seems that Estonia has a relatively low crime rate, especially when it comes to violent crime. In fact, according to the latest statistics, Estonia has one of the lowest homicide rates in Europe.
That's fascinating. I've heard that Estonia's strict laws and penalties for serious crimes contribute to its low crime rate. But what about Hungary? I've heard that Budapest, in particular, has a bit of a crime problem.
Ah, yes. Budapest can be a bit of a challenge, especially for tourists. But overall, Hungary's crime rate is still relatively low compared to other European countries. However, there are some areas in Budapest where pickpocketing and petty theft are more common.
I'm certain that our listeners living in Hungary would agree with me that it's always a good idea to be mindful of one's belongings, especially in crowded areas. But I've also heard that Hungary has a strong emphasis on community policing, which can help to prevent crime.
That's true. Mira, Hungary's community policing efforts have been quite successful in building trust between law enforcement and the community. In fact, Estonia also has a strong focus on community policing, which has contributed to its low crime rate.
I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. Do you think that community policing is an effective way to prevent crime? Or are there other factors at play?
Well, Mira, I think it's a combination of both. Community policing can certainly help to build trust and prevent crime. But it's also important to have strong laws and penalties in place to deter serious crimes.
That's a great point, Leo. And I think it's also worth noting that both Estonia and Hungary have a strong focus on education and social welfare, which can help to reduce crime rates by addressing underlying social issues.
Absolutely. Mira, education and social welfare are key factors in reducing crime rates. And, in fact, both Estonia and Hungary have made significant investments in education and social welfare programs.
I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. Do you think that education and social welfare programs are effective in reducing crime rates? Or are there other factors at play?
Well, Mira, I think it's a combination of both. Education and social welfare programs can certainly help to reduce crime rates. But it's also important to have a strong justice system in place to hold perpetrators accountable.
That's a great point, Leo. And I think it's also worth noting that both Estonia and Hungary have a strong focus on rehabilitation and reintegration programs for offenders, which can help to reduce recidivism rates.
Ah, yes. Yeah. Rehabilitation and reintegration programs are an important part of reducing crime rates. And, in fact, both Estonia and I think that we can conquer that. Both Estonia and Hungary have made significant investments in these programs.
I'm certain that our listeners living in these countries would agree with me that rehabilitation and reintegration programs are a crucial part of the justice system. But I've also heard that Estonia has a unique approach to rehabilitation, focusing on restorative justice and victim offender mediation.
Ah, yes. Yeah. Estonia's restorative justice approach is indeed unique and has been quite successful in reducing recidivism rates. And, in fact, Hungary is also exploring restorative justice approaches, although it's still in its early stages.
I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. Do you think that restorative justice approaches are effective in reducing recidivism rates? Or are there other factors at play?
Well, Mira, I think it's a combination of both. Restorative justice approaches can certainly help to reduce recidivism rates, but it's also important to have a strong justice system in place to hold perpetrators accountable.
That's a great point. And I think it's also worth noting that both Estonia and Hungary have a strong focus on community engagement and participation in the justice system, which can help to build trust and prevent crime.
Absolutely. Mira, community engagement and participation are key factors in building trust and preventing crime. And, in fact, both Estonia and Hungary have made significant investments in community engagement and participation programs.
I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. Do you think that community engagement and participation programs are effective in building trust and preventing crime? Or are there other factors at play?
Well, Mira, I think it's a combination of both. Community engagement and participation programs can certainly help to build trust and prevent crime. But it's also important to have a strong justice system in place to hold perpetrators accountable.
That's a great point, Leo. And I think it's also worth noting that both Estonia and Hungary have a strong focus on addressing the root causes of crime, such as poverty and unemployment, which can help to reduce crime rates.
Yes. Mira, addressing the root causes of crime is indeed a crucial part of reducing crime rates. And, in fact, both Estonia and Hungary have made significant investments in programs aimed at addressing poverty and unemployment.
I'm certain that our listeners living in these countries would agree with me that addressing the root causes of crime is a vital part of the justice system. But I've also heard that Estonia has a unique approach to addressing poverty and unemployment, focusing on social entrepreneurship and innovation.
Yes. Mira, Estonia's social entrepreneurship and innovation approach is indeed unique and has been quite successful in addressing poverty and unemployment. And, in fact, Hungary is also exploring similar approaches.
I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. Do you think that social entrepreneurship and innovation approaches are effective in addressing poverty and unemployment? Or are there other factors at play?
Well, Mira, I think it's a combination of both. Social entrepreneurship and innovation approaches can certainly help to address poverty and unemployment, but it's also important to have a strong social safety net in place to support those in need.
That's a great point, Leo. And I think it's also worth noting that both Estonia and Hungary have a strong focus on education and skills development, which can help to address poverty and unemployment.
Absolutely. Mira, education and skills development are key factors in addressing poverty and unemployment. And, in fact, both Estonia and Hungary have made significant investments in education and skills development programs.
I'm certain that our listeners living in these countries would agree with me that education and skills development are a crucial part of the justice system. But I've also heard that Estonia has a unique approach to education and skills development, focusing on digital skills on de-learning.
Yes. Mira, Estonia's digital skills and de-learning approach is indeed unique and has been quite successful in addressing poverty and unemployment. And, in fact, Hungary is also exploring similar approaches.
I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. Do you think? So, let's dive into the world of Estonia and Hungary and explore how these countries maintain political stability and social harmony. I'm curious. Leo, what do you think is the key to Estonia's stable government?
Great question. Mira, Estonia's parliamentary system has a reputation for being efficient and stable. But, if I'm being honest, I think the real magic happens in the social sphere. The Estonians have a strong sense of community, and their social programs are top-notch.
That's a great point. Leo, Estonia's social welfare system is indeed impressive. But I think what really sets them apart is their commitment to e-government. They've made it incredibly easy for citizens to access public services online, which has greatly reduced bureaucracy and increased transparency.
Absolutely. And it's not just Estonia. Of course, Hungary has also made significant strides in e-government. But I think what's really interesting is how these two countries approach social harmony. Estonia, for example, has a strong emphasis on education and community engagement.
That's right. Estonian schools place a huge emphasis on social skills and community service. And it's not just the schools, the whole society seems to value community engagement. I'm curious. Leo, have you ever experienced this firsthand?
Actually, I have. When I visited Estonia a few years ago, I was struck by the sense of community. Everyone seemed to know each other, and there was a real sense of camaraderie. And, of course, the food. Estonian cuisine is amazing.
Yes, the food is definitely a highlight. But, seriously, Leo, I think what's really impressive about Estonia is their commitment to social cohesion. They've made a conscious effort to promote diversity and inclusion, which has helped to create a more harmonious society.
That's a great point, Mira. And I think Hungary is also doing some amazing work in this area. Their government has implemented a number of initiatives aimed at promoting social harmony and reducing inequality.
That's true. Leo, Hungary's government has indeed made efforts to address social inequality. But I think what's really interesting is how these two countries approach conflict resolution. Estonia, for example, has a strong tradition of mediation and conflict resolution.
Yes. Estonia's approach to conflict resolution is definitely worth noting. And I think Hungary is also learning from Estonia's example. The government has implemented a number of initiatives aimed at promoting mediation and conflict resolution.
I'm curious. Leo, what do you think our listeners would say about the political stability and social harmony in these two countries? Do you think they would agree that Estonia's e-government is a key factor in their stability?
Well, I think our listeners would have a lot to say about this topic. But, seriously, I think they would agree that Estonia's e-government is a major factor in their stability. And, of course, they would also appreciate the social harmony that exists in both countries.
I'm sure they would. For our listeners who are interested in learning more about Estonia and Hungary, I recommend checking out Jetolf, AI for some fascinating insights and data on these countries.
And, if you're interested in learning more about our podcast, be sure to subscribe to our channel on Jetolf AI for more episodes like this one.
Well, that's all for today's episode. Folks, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.
And don't forget to check out our social media channels for more updates and behind-the-scenes peeks at our podcast.
Tune into the economic conditions and cost of living in Estonia and Hungary. I'm to share some insights and personal experiences from my travels to both countries.
I've had some great experiences in both Estonia and Hungary, and I'm curious to see how they compare in terms of economic conditions. One thing that stands out to me is the job market in Estonia. It seems to be thriving, with a strong focus on IT and tech industries.
Ah, yes. Estonia is definitely a hub for tech and innovation, and the cost of living is relatively low compared to other Western European countries. I remember staying in a cozy apartment in Tallinn for a reasonable price. It was a great experience.
That's great to hear. I've also heard that Estonia has a strong startup culture, with many incubators and accelerators supporting new businesses. What about Hungary? Mira? How does it compare in terms of economic conditions?
Well, Hungary has a more traditional economy, with a focus on manufacturing and services. It's still a great place to live and work, with a lower cost of living compared to Western Europe. Of course, the beautiful city of Budapest is a major draw for tourists and expats alike.
I've been to Budapest, and it's an amazing city. The cost of living is relatively low, especially outside of the city center. But what about the job market in Hungary? I've heard that it's a bit more challenging for foreigners to find work.
That's true. While Hungary has a strong economy, it can be tough for foreigners to navigate the job market. But, as I always say, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. There are still many opportunities for expats to find work, especially in the tourism and hospitality industries.
Ha! I love your attitude, Mira. And I'm sure our listeners would agree that having a positive attitude is essential when navigating a new country. But, seriously, what about the cost of living in Hungary? Is it still relatively low compared to Estonia?
Ah, yes. Hungary has a lower cost of living compared to Estonia, especially when it comes to food and transportation. I remember buying a delicious Liongo's for a few euros, and taking a public bus ride for a few cents. It was a great experience.
Line goes. Yes, I love trying local food when I travel. But, seriously, Mira, how does Hungary's cost of living compare to Estonia in terms of housing and rent?
Well, Leo, I've heard that rent prices in Estonia are relatively high, especially in cities like Tallinn. But in Hungary, the rent prices are generally lower, especially outside of Budapest. I've heard that a one-bedroom apartment in Budapest can cost around 200–300 euros per month, while in other parts of the country, it can be even cheaper.
Wow, that's a significant difference. I'm not sure if I would want to live in a small town in Hungary, but it's definitely an option for those on a budget. What about healthcare? Mira, how does it compare in Estonia and Hungary?
Healthcare is a great topic. Both Estonia and Hungary have good healthcare systems, but they have some differences. Estonia has a more modern healthcare system, with a strong focus on prevention and digital health. But Hungary has a more traditional system, with a focus on hospital care.
I see. And what about healthcare costs? Are they relatively low in both countries?
Yes, healthcare costs are relatively low in both countries, especially compared to Western Europe. I've heard that Estonia has a higher healthcare tax, which can add to the overall cost.
Okay, got it. So, to summarize, Estonia has a strong economy and a thriving job market, but a higher cost of living. especially in terms of housing and rent. Hungary has a more traditional economy and a lower cost of living, but a more challenging job market for foreigners.
Exactly. Leo. And, as always, it's essential to do your research and consider your personal circumstances when deciding which country is right for you. If you're a tech enthusiast, Estonia might be the better choice. But if you're looking for a more traditional experience and a lower cost of living, Hungary could be the way to go.
Well, there you have it. Folks, I'm sure our listeners will appreciate the insights and advice from Mira and me. And, as always, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the economic conditions and cost of living in Estonia and Hungary? Share your experiences and comments in the chat below.
Hey, let's talk about something really important for expats, like where to live and how to find the perfect pad. With its capital Tallinn, has a surprisingly well-developed rental market.
That's right. Mira, Estonia's got a lot to offer, from cozy apartments in Old Town to modern studios in the city center. But I've heard that prices can be a bit steep in Tallinn, especially when it comes to luxury apartments.
Yeah, that's true, Leo. But if you're willing to venture out a bit, you can find some amazing deals in the suburbs or even outside the city limits. And let's be real, who needs to be in the city center when you can have a beautiful view of the surrounding countryside?
That's a great point. Mira, and I've heard that Estonia's got a pretty strict housing code, which means that apartments and houses are generally well maintained and safe. But I'm curious, have you ever heard of any horror stories from expats living in Estonia?
Oh, actually, I have. I know someone who rented an apartment in Tallinn and ended up with a roommate who was, let's just say, a bit of a weirdo. But, hey, that's all part of the adventure, right?
Yeah, I guess so. But, in all seriousness, Estonia does have a pretty strong rental market. And I'm sure our listeners would agree that it's a great place to find a comfortable and affordable place to live.
Absolutely. Leo. And if you're looking for a more laid-back vibe, Hungary is definitely worth considering. I mean, who wouldn't want to live in a country with a rich history and stunning natural beauty?
That's right. Mira, Hungary's got a lot to offer, from the stunning parliament building in Budapest to the rolling hills of the countryside. And let's not forget about the delicious food. Who can resist a good goulash or paprika SCRK?
Oh, definitely not me. And I've heard that Hungary's got a pretty relaxed attitude towards renting, which means that expats can often find great deals on apartments and houses.
That's right, Mira. And I've heard that Hungary's got a pretty strong sense of community, which makes it easy to meet new people and make friends. But I'm curious, have you ever heard of any cultural differences that expats might encounter when living in Hungary?
Oh, actually, I have. I know someone who moved to Budapest and ended up getting into a bit of a culture shock when they realized that Hungarians are generally a bit more formal than Estonians. But, hey, that's all parts of the learning curve, right?
Yeah, I guess so. But, in all seriousness, Hungary does have a pretty unique culture, and I'm sure our listeners would agree that it's a great place to experience a new and exciting way of life.
And let's forget about the cost of living in Hungary. Leo, I mean, compared to Estonia, Hungary is generally a bit more affordable, especially when it comes to food and transportation.
That's right. Mira. And I've heard that Hungary's got a pretty well-developed public transportation system, which makes it easy to get around without a car. But I'm curious, have you ever heard of any downsides to living in Hungary?
Oh, actually, I have. I know someone who moved to Budapest and ended up getting frustrated with the bureaucracy and red tape. But, hey, that's just part of the adventure, right?
Yeah, I guess so. But, in all seriousness, Hungary does have its challenges. But I'm sure our listeners would agree that it's a great place to experience a new and exciting culture.
So, there you have it. Folks, a rundown of the accommodation options and quality in Estonia and Hungary. Whether you're looking for a cozy apartment in Tallinn or a stunning villa in Budapest, both countries have something to offer. And, as always, it's up to you to decide which one is right for you.
That's right, Mira. And I'm sure our listeners would agree that it's always a good idea to do your research and visit both countries before making a decision. After all, there's no substitute for experiencing the culture and lifestyle firsthand.
Absolutely. Leo, and if you have any questions or comments, be sure to let us know in the comments section below. We'd love to hear from you and continue the conversation.
That's right, Mira. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more content on expat living and travel. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Let's dive into the world of visa applications, immigration procedures, and official processes in Estonia. Who's ever had the pleasure of navigating those waters?
Ah, yes. The thrill of bureaucratic adventures. Estonia, being a part of the EU, has made the process relatively smooth for EU citizens. But, of course, there are still some hurdles to jump over.
I've heard that Estonia has a pretty straightforward application process, especially for short-term stays. What do you think is the most common challenge that expats face when applying for a visa in Estonia?
I'd say it's the paperwork and documentation requirements. Expats need to provide proof of income, health insurance, and sometimes even a police certificate from their home country. It's a lot to take in. But Estonia's E-Residency program has made things a bit easier for digital nomads and entrepreneurs.
That's a great point. Estonia's E-Residency program has definitely made a splash. I'm curious, Leo, have you ever applied for a visa in Estonia or dealt with the immigration process firsthand?
Well, I've had my fair share of adventures, but I've never applied for a visa in Estonia. However, I've heard that the process is relatively fast, especially for EU citizens. But for non-EU citizens, it can take a bit longer.
I see. So, let's move on to Hungary, our second country for this criterion. What are some common challenges that expats face when navigating the visa application process in Hungary?
Hungary, a beautiful country with a rich history. However, the visa application process can be a bit more, let's say, interesting. Expats often struggle with the lengthy application process and the requirement for a sponsor or guarantor.
That's right. I've heard that Hungary has a more complex application process, especially for non-EU citizens. What do you think is the most important thing for expats to know when applying for a visa in Hungary?
I'd say it's essential to understand the different types of visas available, such as the work visa, student visa, or retirement visa. Each has its own set of requirements and regulations.
That's a great tip. Leo, so let's talk about the E-Residency program in Estonia. How does it compare to Hungary's approach to digital nomads and entrepreneurs?
Well, Estonia's E-Residency program is quite unique, allowing digital nomads and entrepreneurs to register and manage their businesses online. Hungary, on the other hand, has a more traditional approach, requiring physical presence and paperwork.
I see. So, if you're an expat looking to move to either Estonia or Hungary, what's the most important thing to keep in mind when it comes to visa applications and immigration procedures?
I'd say it's essential to research. Research. Understand the requirements, regulations, and processes for each country. And don't be afraid to seek help from experts or authorities.
Well, Leo, I think that's a great note to end on. To our listeners, I'm curious, have you ever applied for a visa in Estonia or Hungary? What was your experience like?
Well, I'm sure our listeners have some interesting stories to share. Perhaps we can hear from some of them in the comments section.
Absolutely. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more content on visa applications, immigration procedures, and official processes in Estonia and Hungary. We'll be back with more exciting topics soon.
And don't forget to follow us on social media for the latest updates and behind-the-scenes peeks into our podcasting adventures.
Dive into the fascinating world of healthcare in Estonia and Hungary. Both countries have made significant strides in modernizing their healthcare systems. But I'm curious. Leo, have you had any experiences with Estonia's healthcare system?
Actually, I have. A friend of mine had to visit the hospital in Tallinn, and the efficiency of the system impressed me. From what I've heard, Estonia's Z-health system is one of the most advanced in the world, allowing patients to access their medical records online.
That's fascinating. And I'm sure our listeners living in Estonia would agree with me that the country's focus on digital healthcare has made a significant impact. Now, let's talk about Hungary. I've heard that Hungary has a unique approach to healthcare, with a strong emphasis on preventive care.
Yes, that's true. Hungary's healthcare system is based on a social insurance model, and it's known for its high-quality medical services. However, I've also heard that there can be long waiting times for non-emergency procedures.
Yes. That's a common challenge in many healthcare systems. But I'm sure our listeners living in Hungary would agree with me that the country's healthcare professionals are highly skilled and dedicated. And Leo, I'm curious. Have you had any experiences with Hungary's healthcare system?
Well, I haven't had any personal experiences, but I've heard that Hungary's healthcare system is quite comprehensive, with a wide range of medical services available. However, I've also heard that there can be some challenges with accessing specialized care, especially in rural areas.
That's a great point, Leo. And I think it's worth noting that both Estonia and Hungary have made significant investments in healthcare infrastructure, including hospitals and medical facilities.
Yes, that's true. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have a strong focus on public health, with initiatives aimed at promoting healthy lifestyles and preventing chronic diseases.
I love that. And I'm sure our listeners would agree with me that a strong focus on public health is essential for a healthy society. Now, let's talk about the cost of healthcare in both countries. I've heard that Estonia has a relatively high cost of healthcare, especially for foreigners.
Yes, that's true. Estonia's healthcare system is known for its high-quality services, but it can be quite expensive, especially for those who don't have access to public health insurance.
I see. And I'm sure our listeners living in Estonia would agree with me that the cost of healthcare can be a challenge, especially for those who are not covered by public health insurance.
Yes, that's true. But I think it's worth noting that both countries have programs in place to help make healthcare more accessible and affordable for those who need it.
That's great to hear, Leah. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have a strong focus on patient-centered care, with an emphasis on individualized treatment plans and patient engagement.
I love that. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have made significant investments in healthcare research and development, with a focus on developing new treatments and therapies.
That's fascinating. And I'm sure our listeners would agree with me that a strong focus on healthcare research and development is essential for improving healthcare outcomes.
Yes, that's true. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have a strong focus on health education and awareness, with initiatives aimed at promoting healthy lifestyles and preventing chronic diseases.
I love that. And I'm sure our listeners would agree with me that health education and awareness are essential for promoting healthy behaviors and preventing chronic diseases.
Yes, that's true. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have a strong focus on community-based healthcare, with an emphasis on providing healthcare services in community settings.
That's great to hear, Leo. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have made significant investments in healthcare infrastructure, including hospitals and medical facilities.
Yes, that's true. And I think. It's also worth noting that both countries have a strong focus on healthcare workforce development, with initiatives aimed at recruiting and retaining healthcare professionals.
I love that. And I'm sure our listeners would agree with me that a strong focus on healthcare workforce development is essential for ensuring that healthcare systems have the capacity to meet the needs of their populations.
Yes, that's true. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have a strong focus on health equity, with initiatives aimed at reducing health disparities and promoting health equity.
Ah, that's great to hear, Leo. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have made significant investments in healthcare research and development, with a focus on developing new treatments and therapies.
Yes, that's true. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have a strong focus on patient safety, with initiatives aimed at reducing medical errors and promoting safe care practices.
I love that. And I'm sure our listeners would agree with me that patient safety is essential for ensuring that healthcare systems provide high quality care.
Yes, that's true. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have a strong focus on health information technology, with initiatives aimed at promoting the use of health, i.e., to improve healthcare outcomes.
That's fascinating. I'm sure our listeners would agree with me that health information technology is essential for improving healthcare outcomes.
Yes, that's true. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have a strong focus on healthcare workforce development, with initiatives aimed at recruiting and retaining healthcare professionals.
I love that. And I'm sure our listeners would agree with me that a strong focus on healthcare workforce development is essential for ensuring that healthcare systems have the capacity to meet the needs of their populations.
Yes, that's true. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have a strong focus on health equity, with initiatives aimed at reducing health disparities and promoting health equity.
That's great to hear, Leo. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have made significant investments in healthcare research and development, with a focus on developing new treatments and therapies.
Yes, that's true. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have a strong focus on patient safety, with initiatives aimed at reducing medical errors and promoting safe care practices.
I love that. And I'm sure our listeners would agree with me that patient safety is essential for ensuring that healthcare systems provide high-quality care.
Yes, that's true.
All right, let's get into transportation infrastructure and convenience in our two countries, Estonia and Hungary. I'm sure many of you are curious about how to get around these places. Leo, what's your take on Estonia's public transit system?
Estonia's got a solid public transit system, especially in Tallinn. You can get around easily with buses and trams, and even a Finno-Ugric to get to the upper part of the city. But have you noticed how everyone in Tallinn is always in a rush? It's like they're in a hurry to get to the next coffee shop.
Yeah, that's true. But seriously, Estonia's got some great bike sharing programs and even a bike lane network. I bet our listeners in Estonia would love to know more about their city's transport options. If you're planning to visit, make sure to check out the Tallinn card for unlimited public transport.
The Tallinn card, a lifesaver for tourists. But speaking of Hungary, have you ever tried to navigate Budapest's public transit system? It's like trying to solve a puzzle. But in all seriousness, Hungary's got a lot of work to do to improve its public transit system.
Oh, Leo, you're so dramatic. But yes, Budapest's public transit system can be a bit confusing. They do have some great tram lines and buses, and even a Finno-Ugric to get to the top of Castle Hill. And did you know that Hungary has a growing bike sharing program too?
Yes, but it's not as extensive as Estonia's. And have you seen the roads in Hungary? They're like a roller coaster. But in all seriousness, Hungary's got a lot of potential for improving its road network.
Oh, Leo, you're such a thrill seeker. But, yes, Hungary's roads can be a bit challenging. They do have some great scenic routes, like a Danube bend, which is perfect for a road trip. And did you know that Estonia has some great scenic routes too? Like the Lehema National Park?
Yes. But Lehema National Park is a bit of a trek from Tallinn. And have you ever tried to drive in Tallinn? It's like a game of Frogger. But in all seriousness, Estonia's got a great public transit system, and it's definitely worth exploring.
Oh, Leo, you're so funny. But, yes, driving in Tallinn can be a bit challenging. They do have some great pedestrian-friendly areas, like the Old Town. And did you know that Hungary has some great pedestrian-friendly areas too, like the Andrusy Avenue?
Yes. But Andrusy Avenue is a bit of a tourist trap. And have you seen the prices of taxis in Hungary? They're like a luxury item. But in all seriousness, Hungary's got some great taxi services, and they're definitely worth trying.
Oh, Leo, you're such a jokester. But, yes, taxi prices in Hungary can be a bit steep. However, they do have some great public transit options, like the metro and buses. And did you know that Estonia has some great public transit apps, like the Tallinn Transit app?
Yes. But the Tallinn Transit app is a bit of a pain to use. And have you ever tried to navigate the public transit system in a foreign country? It's like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube. But in all seriousness, Estonia's got a great public transit system, and it's definitely worth exploring.
Oh, Leo, you are so funny. But, yes, navigating public transit in a foreign country can be a challenge. They do have some great resources, like the Estonian public transit website, to help you plan your trip. And did you know that Hungary has some great public transit resources too, like the Hungarian public transit website?
Yes. But the Hungarian public transit website is a bit of a mess. And have you seen the prices of parking in Budapest? They're like a luxury item. But in all seriousness, Hungary's got some great parking options, and they're definitely worth trying.
Oh, Leo, you're such a jokester. But, yes, parking prices in Budapest can be a bit steep. However, they do have some great public transit options, like the metro and buses. And did you know that Estonia has some great cycling routes, like the Tallinn Baltic Sea cycling route?
Yes. But the Tallinn Baltic Sea cycling route is a bit of a trek. And have you ever tried to navigate the roads in Hungary? It's like trying to solve a puzzle. But in all seriousness, Hungary's got a lot of potential for improving its road network.
Oh, Leo, you're so dramatic. But, yes, navigating the roads in Hungary can be a challenge. However, they do have some great scenic routes, like the Danube Bend. And did you know that Estonia has some great scenic routes too, like the Lehema National Park?
Yes. But Lehema National Park is a bit of a trek from Tallinn. And have you seen the prices of fuel in Hungary? They're like a luxury item. But in all seriousness, Hungary's got some great fuel options, and they're definitely worth trying.
Oh, Leo, you're such a jokester. But, yes, fuel prices in Hungary can be a bit steep. However, they do have some great public transit options, like the metro and buses. And did you know that Estonia has some great public transit apps, like the Tallinn Transit app?
Yes. But the Tallinn Transit app is a bit of a pain to use. And have you ever tried to navigate the public transit system in a foreign country? It's like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube. But in all seriousness, Estonia's got a great public transit system, and it's definitely worth exploring.
Oh, Leo, You're so funny. But, yes, navigating public transit in a foreign country can be a challenge. They do have some great resources, like the Estonian public transit website, to help you plan your trip. And did you know that Hungary has some great public transit resources too, like the Hungarian public transit website?
Ah, yes. The...
Hey, have you guys ever tried to navigate a foreign language and ended up getting completely lost in translation? I've been there, done that, and got the funny stories to prove it.
I'm sure you did. But seriously, language barriers can be a major obstacle for travelers and expats.
Exactly. And today, we're going to explore the language landscape in Estonia and Hungary. I'm curious. Leo, what do you know about the Estonian language?
Well, it's a Uralic language, and it's quite different from the Indo-European languages spoken in Europe.
That's fascinating. I've heard that Estonian is one of the most difficult languages for English speakers to learn.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. But on the other hand, it's also a great opportunity for language learners to improve their skills.
I'm sure it is. So, let's talk about the language diversity in Estonia. What can our listeners expect?
Estonia has a relatively small population, but it's a multicultural country with many languages spoken. You'll find Estonian, Russian, English, and even some Finnish spoken in certain regions.
That's interesting. I've heard that the younger generation in Estonia is quite proficient in English. Is that true?
Yes, it's true. Many Estonians speak English as a second language, especially in the capital city, Tallinn.
That's great to hear. I'm certain that our listeners living in Estonia would agree with me that English is widely spoken.
Absolutely. In fact, Estonia has a very high rate of English proficiency, especially among the younger population.
I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. Do they have any favorite Estonian words or phrases?
Well, I'm sure some of our listeners would love to learn a few Estonian phrases, but I'm not sure if they'd want to try pronouncing them.
That's true. Estonian pronunciation can be quite challenging. But hey, it's all part of the fun, right?
Yeah, that's right. Now, let's talk about Hungary. What can our listeners expect in terms of language barriers?
Well, Hungarian is a Uralic language, just like Estonian, but it's a bit more challenging for English speakers to learn.
That's right. Hungarian has a unique grammar and syntax, and it's not as widely spoken as some other languages in Europe.
I've heard that Hungarian is a beautiful language, but it's also quite difficult to master. Is that true?
Yes, it's true. Hungarian is a great example of a language that's both beautiful and challenging.
I'm sure many of our listeners would agree with me that Hungarian is a beautiful language.
Yeah, and it's also a great opportunity for language learners to improve their skills.
That's a great point. So, let's talk about the language diversity in Hungary. What can our listeners expect?
Hungary has a relatively high level of language diversity, with many languages spoken, including Hungarian, English, German, and even some Slavic languages.
I've heard that the capital city, Budapest, is a major hub for language learners. Is that true?
Yes, it's true. Budapest is a great place for language learners, with many language schools and cultural events.
I'm sure many of our listeners would agree with me that Budapest is a fantastic city for language learners.
Yeah, and it's also a great place to try some delicious Hungarian cuisine.
That's true. Hungarian food is amazing. Okay, so let's summarize. What can our listeners expect in terms of language barriers in Estonia and Hungary?
Well, both countries have their unique language challenges, but they also offer great opportunities for language learners.
That's right. And I'm sure many of our listeners would agree with me that language barriers are a normal part of traveling and expat life.
Yeah, and it's also a great opportunity to learn and improve your language skills.
That's a great point. If you have any favorite Estonian or Hungarian words or phrases, Please let us know in the comments below.
And if you have any funny stories about language barriers, we'd love to hear them too.
That's right. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more content on language and culture.
And if you're feeling brave, try speaking some Estonian or Hungarian with our language learner's guide.
That's a great idea. Leo, I'm curious. Leo, have you ever walked through and felt like you're in a different world? I had that experience in Tallinn, Estonia, where the old town is so picturesque it feels like a fairy tale. The mix of medieval architecture and modern art is just fascinating.
Ah, yes. Estonia is indeed a unique blend of old and new. But what struck me was the emphasis on social harmony and diversity initiatives. I spoke to a local who mentioned the Tarda Spring Festival where people from different ethnic backgrounds come together to celebrate. It's amazing to see how they're promoting cultural exchange.
That's so cool. I also noticed that Estonia has a strong emphasis on education and promoting understanding between different cultures. The Estonian Culture Days are a great example of this, where people can learn about different cultures and traditions. And let's not forget the beautiful Estonian folk music.
You're really getting into the Estonian spirit. Mira! But seriously, I think it's great that they're prioritizing cultural exchange and education. Now, let's talk about Hungary. I've always been fascinated by the rich cultural heritage of Hungary, from the stunning architecture to the vibrant art scene.
Oh, yes. Hungary is definitely a treasure trove of culture. I've heard that the city of Budapest is one of the most beautiful in Europe, with its stunning parliament building and thermal baths. But what really caught my attention was the emphasis on preserving traditional crafts and folk music.
Ah, yes. The Hungarians take great pride in their traditional crafts and folk music. And it's wonderful to see how they're passing down these traditions to the younger generation. I've also noticed that Hungary has a strong tradition of welcoming refugees and asylum seekers. It's heartwarming to see how they're showing compassion and kindness to those in need.
That's so true. Leo, and I think it's great that Hungary is prioritizing social cohesion and inclusivity. I'm certain that our listeners living in Hungary would agree with me that the country has a lot to offer in terms of cultural diversity and tolerance.
I think you're right. Mira, but let's not forget that Hungary also has its own unique challenges when it comes to social cohesion. I've spoken to some Hungarians who mentioned the tensions between different ethnic groups and the need for more education and dialogue.
Yes, I've heard that too. But I think it's great that Hungary is acknowledging these challenges and working to address them. And I think it's wonderful that they're prioritizing education and cultural exchange. If you think this is wrong, please let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
I think we're getting into a great discussion here. Mira, and I'm curious to hear from our listeners, what do you think about the cultural diversity and tolerance initiatives in Estonia and Hungary?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Leo, I think it's wonderful to see both countries prioritizing cultural exchange and social cohesion. And I think it's great that they're acknowledging the challenges and working to address them.
Absolutely, Mira. And I think it's a great example of how different countries can learn from each other and work together to promote cultural diversity and tolerance.
I think we're just getting started on this topic. Leo! But for now, let's just say that both Estonia and Hungary have a lot to offer in terms of cultural diversity and tolerance.
Agreed. Mira, and I think we'll continue this conversation in our next episode. Stay tuned, folks.
And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more fun and informative content. Estonia's education system is truly impressive, with literacy rates among the highest in the world. I'm curious. Leo, have you heard about the unique approach to education in Estonia?
Yes, I have. They're known for their emphasis on digital literacy and online learning platforms. It's like they're saying, why bother with traditional classrooms when you can learn from the comfort of your own home?
That's a great point, Leo. But what about the language schools? I've heard that Estonian language schools are very effective in teaching non-native speakers.
Ah, yes. The Estonian language schools are indeed very good. They offer a range of programs for foreigners, from beginner to advanced levels. And the best part? They're often taught by native speakers who are passionate about language and culture.
I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the language schools in Estonia. Have you heard of any particular schools that stand out?
Well, there's one school in Tallinn that's particularly well known for its language programs. They offer a range of courses, from Estonian language and culture to business English.
That sounds fascinating. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about it. If you are living in Estonia or moving there, I'm sure you'd be interested in learning more about this school.
And if you're a language enthusiast, you might want to consider moving to Estonia. The language schools are top-notch, and the locals are friendly and welcoming.
That's a great point, Leo. But let's not forget about Hungary. What about the educational opportunities there?
Yes. Hungary has a rich history of education, dating back to the Middle Ages. They have a strong focus on STEM education, and their universities are highly regarded.
I've heard that the University of Debrecen is one of the top universities in Hungary. What about language schools? Do they offer any programs for non-native speakers?
Yes, the University of Debrecen has a language center that offers courses in Hungarian language and culture. And they also have a range of international programs for students who want to learn English or other languages.
That sounds great. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the language schools in Hungary. If you're living in Hungary or of moving there, I'm sure you'd be interested in learning more about the University of Debrecen.
And if you're a language enthusiast, you might want to consider moving to Hungary. The language schools are top-notch, and the locals are friendly and welcoming.
That's a great point. Leo, but let's talk about the unique aspects of each country's education system. In Estonia, they have a focus on digital literacy, while in Hungary, they have a strong focus on STEM education.
Yes. That's a great point. And it's interesting to see how each country approaches education in their own unique way.
I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the educational opportunities in each country. Do you have any questions about Estonia or Hungary?
Well, I do have one question. If you were to move to either of these countries, which one would you choose and why?
That's a great question, Leo, and I'm sure our listeners would love to know your answer.
Well, I think I would choose Estonia. The digital literacy and the online learning platforms are really impressive.
That's a great point, Leo. But what about Hungary? Don't you think the focus on STEM education is impressive?
Yes. Hungary has a lot to offer. But I think Estonia's unique approach to education is really compelling.
Well, I think we can both agree that both countries have their own unique strengths when it comes to education. And that's all for today's topic. Thank you for joining us. And we'll see you in the next episode. So, let's talk about climate and seasonal conditions in Estonia and Hungary. I'm curious. Leo, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Estonia's climate?
Well, Mira, I think of a country where the sun doesn't really shine for most of the year. I mean, have you seen the temperature data for Estonia? It's like minus 10 degrees Celsius in January.
Yeah, that's true. But, Leo, you have to admit, there's something magical about experiencing winter in Estonia. The snow-covered landscapes, the frozen lakes. It's like a winter wonderland.
Oh, you're trying to romanticize it, Mira. But, seriously, the harsh winters in Estonia can be quite challenging. And what about Hungary? I've heard it's a bit warmer there, right?
That's right. Leo, Hungary's climate is generally milder than Estonia's. But, did you know that Hungary can still experience some pretty extreme weather conditions? Like heavy rainfall and flooding.
Yeah, I've heard that Hungary's weather can be quite unpredictable. But, hey, at least the summers are nice and warm, right? I mean, who doesn't love a good summer festival?
That's true, Leo. And speaking of summer festivals, I'm sure our listeners living in Hungary would agree with me that the Sziget Festival is one of the highlights of the year. Am I right?
Yeah, Mira, you're right. The Sziget Festival is a huge event. But, I'm curious, What about Estonia's summer festivals? Do you think they're as lively as Hungary's?
Actually, Leo, Estonia has a great festival scene too. The Estonian Song and Dance Festival is a big deal, and it's a great opportunity to experience the country's rich cultural heritage.
Ah, I see what you did there. Mira, you're trying to one-up me with Estonia's cultural events. But I'm not impressed.
Oh, Leo, you're such a tease. But, seriously, both countries have a lot to offer in terms of cultural events and festivals. And let's not forget about the natural beauty of both countries.
Yeah, that's true. Both Estonia and Hungary have some amazing natural landscapes. I mean, have you seen the stunning lakes and forests of Estonia? It's like a paradise for nature lovers.
That's right, Leo. And speaking of nature, I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the local adaptations that people have made to deal with the extreme weather conditions in both countries.
Ah, good point. Mira, in Estonia, for example, people have developed some clever ways to deal with the harsh winters. Like, have you heard of the concept of coda or home heating?
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. It's like a traditional Estonian method of heating homes using hot water and pipes. And in Hungary, people have developed some amazing ways to deal with the heat in the summer.
Exactly. And I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about these local adaptations. Maybe we can even get some tips from our listeners on how to deal with the extreme weather conditions in their own countries.
That's a great idea. And before we go, I'd like to ask our listeners a question. What do you think about the climate and seasonal conditions in Estonia and Hungary? Do you have any tips or advice to share with us?
Yeah, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast for more fun and informative content. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comments section below.
Thanks, Leo, for joining me on this topic. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, stay warm and dry. I'm absolutely thrilled to dive into the world of food culture and nutritional alternatives in Estonia and Hungary. Let's start with the basics. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Estonian cuisine? Leo?
Well, I think of dark rye bread, sauerkraut, and of course, the infamous Estonian pasties, those delicious little packets of meat and potatoes that'll keep you going all day long.
Oh, I love that. And speaking of delicious food, have you ever tried the traditional Hungarian dish? Goulash? I'm curious, how does it compare to the Estonian soups? Like currywurst?
Oh, goulash is a whole different beast. My friend, it's a rich, flavorful, so that's more like a national treasure than just a meal. But I have to say, currywurst is a great choice. It's like a hearty, comforting hug in a bowl.
Exactly. And I think that's what's so wonderful about both Estonian and Hungarian cuisine. They're all about hearty, comforting food that warms the soul. But let's talk about something a bit more modern. Have you heard about the Estonian food revolution? They're really pushing the boundaries of innovative food solutions.
Yes. I've heard great things about the Estonian food scene. They're really embracing sustainable and locally sourced ingredients. And it's fantastic to see. I'm curious, what kind of innovative food solutions are they coming up with?
Oh, everything from vegan and gluten-free options to using technology to create new, healthier food products. It's really fascinating to see how they're using science and creativity to revolutionize the way we eat.
That's amazing. And I'm sure our listeners are wondering, what about Hungary? Are they also embracing this trend towards healthier, more sustainable food?
Well, Hungary has its own unique approach to food culture. But, yes, they're also embracing the trend towards healthier eating. In fact, they're known for their delicious traditional dishes like lángos and rēties, which are both perfect for snacking on the go.
Lángos? Yes. Those are some of my favorite Hungarian treats. But seriously, I think it's great to see both countries embracing the trend towards healthier eating. It's all about finding balance and enjoying life, right?
Exactly. And speaking of balance, let's talk about the importance of nutritional diversity in both countries. How do you think Estonian and Hungarian cuisine can be improved to cater to different nutritional needs?
Well, I think it's all about variety and flexibility. Both countries have a great foundation of traditional dishes, but they can also benefit from incorporating more modern, innovative ingredients and techniques to cater to different dietary needs.
I completely agree. And I think our listeners would agree with us. I'm curious. Have you tried any of the innovative food solutions from Estonia or Hungary? What do you think of the traditional dishes?
And I'm sure our listeners are wondering, what about the food culture in both countries? How does it impact the way they live and interact with each other?
Well, let's talk about that. In Estonia, food culture is all about community and sharing meals together. It's not uncommon to see people gathering around the table for a traditional meal, like verivurst or kalakake.
And in Hungary, food culture is also very community-oriented. They have a strong tradition of family gatherings and meals, like laingos and rēties, which are perfect for snacking on the go.
I'm so glad we're having this conversation. It's amazing to see how both countries are embracing the trend towards healthier eating and community-oriented food culture. And I think our listeners are taking note.
Absolutely. And before we wrap up, I just want to say that I'm loving this conversation about food culture and nutritional alternatives in Estonia and Hungary. It's been a real eye-opener for me. And I'm sure for our listeners too.
Will, Estopic, thanks for joining us, everyone. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more exciting conversations about food culture and travel.
And if you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you.
And to dive into the rich historical, cultural, and artistic values of Estonia and Hungary. Let's start with Estonia, a country that boasts an impressive array of medieval towns, castles, and fortresses. Jet off. AI's uncovering stories like this, and so do we.
Ah, yes. Estonia's medieval charm is indeed captivating. But have you ever noticed how it's often overshadowed by its more famous neighbor, Latvia? I mean, don't get me wrong, Latvia's got its own charm, but Estonia's got a certain Kini says quo.
Oh, Leo, you're such a tease. But seriously, Estonia's got a unique cultural heritage that's definitely worth exploring. From the stunning Kodri or palace to the vibrant city of Tallinn, there's so much to see and experience.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the Estonian folk music and dance traditions. I mean, who wouldn't want to watch a group of Estonians performing a traditional polka, complete with accordion and fiddle?
Oh, Leo, you're making me want to dance. But seriously, the Estonian folk music and dance traditions are an important part of the country's cultural heritage. And speaking of heritage, have you ever heard of the Estonian Song Festival?
Ah, yes. The Estonian Song Festival is an incredible event that brings together thousands of singers to perform traditional songs. It's a true celebration of Estonian culture and identity.
Exactly. And it's not just the music and dance that are important, but also the country's rich history and mythology. From the legend of the Kalevi Poegi to the stories of the Estonian national hero, Lennart Meri, there's so much to explore and learn about.
That's true. And speaking of heroes, have you ever heard of the Hungarian national hero, Lajos Kossuth? He was a true patriot who fought for Hungarian independence and is still celebrated today.
Ah, yes. Lajos Kossuth is indeed a legendary figure in Hungarian history. And speaking of history, have you ever visited the stunning Buda Castle in Budapest? It's an absolute must-see for anyone interested in history and culture.
Absolutely. The Buda Castle is an incredible piece of architecture that's steeped in history and culture. And let's not forget about the Hungarian folk music and dance traditions, which are just as rich and vibrant as those of Estonia.
Oh, Leo, you're making me want to dance again. But seriously, the Hungarian folk music and dance traditions are an important part of the country's cultural heritage. And speaking of heritage, have you ever heard of the Hungarian folk music ensemble, Himnusias?
Ah, yes. MUZSIKs is an incredible ensemble that's dedicated to preserving and promoting Hungarian folk music and dance traditions. They're a true treasure of Hungarian culture.
Exactly. And it's not just the music and dance that are important, but also the country's rich history and mythology. From the legend of the Hungarian hero, Alpid, to the stories of the Hungarian national hero, Lajos Kossuth. There's so much to explore and learn about.
That's true. And speaking of heroes, have you ever heard of the Estonian national hero, Leonard Meri? He was a true patriot who fought for Estonian independence and is still celebrated today.
Ah, yes. Leonard Meri is indeed a legendary figure in Estonian history. And speaking of history, have you ever visited the stunning Tallinn Old Town? It's an absolute must-see for anyone interested in history and culture.
Absolutely. The Tallinn Old Town is an incredible piece of architecture that's steeped in history and culture. And let's not forget about the Estonian folk music and dance traditions, which are just as rich and vibrant as those of Hungary.
Oh, Leo, you're making me want to dance again. But seriously, the Estonian folk music and dance traditions are an important part of the country's cultural heritage. And speaking of heritage, have you ever heard of the Estonian National Museum?
Ah, yes. The Estonian National Museum is an incredible institution that's dedicated to preserving and promoting Estonian cultural heritage. They're a true treasure of Estonian culture.
Exactly. And it's not just the museum that's important, but also the country's rich history and mythology. From the legend of the Karivipo, e.g. to the stories of the Estonian national hero, Leonard Meri. There's so much to explore and learn about.
That's true. And speaking of heroes, have you ever heard of the Hungarian national hero, Lajos Kossuth? He was a true patriot who fought for Hungarian independence and is still celebrated today.
Yes. Lajos Kossuth is indeed a legendary figure in Hungarian history. And speaking of history, have you ever visited the stunning Eger Castle in Hungary? It's an absolute must-see for anyone interested in history and culture.
Absolutely. The Eger Castle is an incredible piece of architecture that's steeped in history and culture. And let's not forget about the Hungarian folk music and dance traditions, which are just as rich and vibrant as those of Estonia.
Oh, Leo, you're making me want to dance again. But seriously, the Hungarian folk music and dance traditions are an important part of the country's cultural heritage. And speaking of heritage, have you ever heard of the Hungarian State Opera House?
Ah, yes. The Hungarian State Opera House is an incredible institution that's dedicated to preserving and promoting Hungarian cultural heritage. They're a true treasure of Hungarian culture.
Exactly. And it's not just the opera house that's important, but also the country's rich history and mythology. From the legend of the Hungarian hero, Alpid, to the stories of the Hungarian national hero, Lajos Kossuth. There's so much to explore and learn about.
That's true. And speaking of heroes, have you ever heard of the Estonian national hero, Leonard Meri? He was a true patriot who fought for Estonian independence and is still celebrated today.
Yes. Leonard Meri is indeed a legendary figure in Estonian history. And speaking of history, have you ever visited the stunning Kadriorg Palace in Estonia? It's an absolute must-see for anyone interested in history and culture.
Absolutely. The Kadriorg Palace is an incredible piece of architecture that's steeped in history and culture. And let's not forget about the Estonian folk music and dance traditions, which are just as rich and vibrant as those of Hungary.
Oh, Leo, you're making me want to dance again. But seriously, the Estonian folk music and dance traditions are an important part of the country's cultural heritage. And speaking of heritage, have you ever heard of? I'm so to dive into the natural beauties and landscapes of Estonia and Hungary. As we explore these two countries, I'm curious. Leo, have you ever been to the Baltic coast of Estonia?
Ah, yes. I have. And it's breathtaking. The rugged coastline, the sandy beaches, and the picturesque fishing villages all blend together to create a serene atmosphere that's perfect for relaxation. And don't even get me started on the islands. Sarama and Hiomea are absolute gems.
That sounds amazing. I've heard that Estonia has some incredible national parks, like Lahemaa National Park. Have you had a chance to explore any of those?
Actually, I spent a few days hiking in Lahemaa, and it was incredible. The forests, the wetlands, and the coastline all come together to create a unique ecosystem that's home to a wide variety of wildlife. And the best part, it's still relatively off the beaten path. So, you can really get a sense of the natural beauty of the area.
That's fantastic. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about it. And speaking of off the beaten path, have you heard about the stunning natural wonders of Hungary? I've heard that Lake Balaton is a must-see.
Yes. Lake Balaton is incredible. It's the largest lake in Central Europe, and it's surrounded by rolling hills, vineyards, and picturesque villages. And if you're looking for something a bit more adventurous, there's the Danube by Pali National Park, which is home to some of the most beautiful and diverse landscapes in the country.
Wow, that sounds incredible. I've also heard that Hungary has some amazing caves, like the Barad Lardumica cave. Have you had a chance to explore any of those?
Actually, I spent a few hours exploring the Barad Lardumica cave, and it was mind-blowing. The stalactites and stalagmites, the underground rivers, and the unique rock formations all come together to create an otherworldly atmosphere that's truly unforgettable.
That sounds like an amazing experience. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about it. And speaking of unique landscapes, have you heard about the stunning natural beauty of the Estonian islands?
Yes. The islands of Estonia are absolutely breathtaking. The rugged coastline, the sandy beaches, and the picturesque fishing villages all blend together to create a serene atmosphere that's perfect for relaxation. And don't even get me started on the islands Sarama and Hiomea are absolute gems.
That's fantastic. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about it. And speaking of relaxation, have you ever tried any of the natural spas in Estonia? I've heard that the sauna culture is a big part of Estonian tradition.
Yes. The sauna culture in Estonia is incredible. There's nothing quite like relaxing in a traditional sauna, surrounded by the beauty of nature. And if you're looking for something a bit more adventurous, there's the opportunity to take a dip in the icy waters of the Baltic Sea. It's invigorating, to say the least.
I can imagine. And speaking of invigorating experiences, have you ever tried any of the natural adventures in Hungary? I've heard that the Danube River is a popular spot for kayaking and drafting.
Yes. The Danube River is an absolute must-see for any nature lover. The stunning scenery, the unique wildlife, and the exciting opportunities for adventure all come together to create an unforgettable experience. And if you're looking for something a bit more relaxing, there's the opportunity to take a scenic boat tour along the river. It's the perfect way to see the sights and enjoy the beauty of nature.
That sounds like a great way to experience the natural beauty of Hungary. And speaking of scenic views, have you ever seen the stunning sunsets in Estonia?
Yes. The sunsets in Estonia are truly breathtaking. The way the light filters through the trees, the colors of the sky, and the peaceful atmosphere all come together to create a truly unforgettable experience. And if you're looking for something a bit more adventurous, there's the opportunity to take a hike to the top of one of Estonia's many hills or mountains. The views are simply stunning.
Well, that sounds incredible. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about it. And speaking of incredible experiences, have you ever tried any of the local cuisine in Estonia or Hungary? I've heard that the food is delicious and unique.
Yes. The local cuisine in both Estonia and Hungary is absolutely delicious. The traditional dishes, the unique flavors, and the hearty portions all come together to create a truly unforgettable culinary experience. And if you're looking for something a bit more adventurous, there's the opportunity to try some of the local specialties like the Estonian Verivurst or the Hungarian line goes.
I think I need to try some of that. And speaking of trying new things, have you ever visited any of the unique museums in Estonia or Hungary? I've heard that they're full of fascinating exhibits and artifacts.
Yes. The museums in both Estonia and Hungary are absolutely fascinating. The unique exhibits, the historical artifacts, and the educational value all come together to create a truly unforgettable experience. And if you're looking for something a bit more interactive, there's the opportunity to visit one of the many interactive museums or exhibitions. It's a great way to learn something new and have fun at the same time.
That sounds like a great way to experience the culture and history of Estonia and Hungary. And speaking of culture, have you ever attended any of the traditional festivals in either country? I've heard that they're full of music, dance, and celebration.
Yes. The traditional festivals in Estonia and Hungary are absolutely fantastic. The music, the dance, the food, and the celebration all come together to create a truly unforgettable experience. And if you're looking for something a bit more adventurous, there's the opportunity to try some of the traditional dances or join in on the celebration. It's a great way to get involved and have fun.
That sounds like an amazing experience. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about it. And speaking of experiences, have you ever tried any of the natural adventures in Estonia or Hungary? I've heard that they're full of exciting opportunities for outdoor enthusiasts.
Yes. The natural adventures in both Estonia and Hungary are absolutely incredible. The hiking trails, the scenic views, and the unique wildlife all come together to create a truly unforgettable experience. And if you're looking for something a bit more relaxing, there's the opportunity to take a scenic boat tour or leisurely hike. It's the perfect way to see the sights and enjoy the beauty of nature.
That sounds like a great way to experience the natural beauty of Estonia and Hungary. And speaking of great experiences, have you ever tried any of the local? I'm to talk about sports, activity, and adventure options in Estonia and Hungary. Let's start with Estonia, where outdoor enthusiasts can enjoy a wide range of activities, from hiking and cycling to skiing and snowboarding. Estonia's beautiful natural landscapes provide endless opportunities for adventure.
Estonia's a great choice. I've heard their national parks are teeming with wildlife, including brown bears and wolves. And have you heard about the running tour of Tallinn? It's a unique way to explore the city's historic sites while getting some exercise.
That sounds like a great idea. Leo, I've also heard that Estonia has a thriving cycling culture. In fact, the country has invested heavily in its cycling infrastructure, making it easy for tourists to explore the countryside on two wheels.
That's true. Mira, and speaking of cycling, have you heard about the Eurovelo cycling route that passes through Estonia? It's a 12. So I think that we can conquer that 0-kilometer route that takes you through 12 European countries, including Estonia.
Well, that's a long route, but I'm sure it's an adventure of a lifetime. And I'm curious, Leo, what about Hungary? What kind of sports and activities can you expect to find there?
Hungary is a great choice too. They have a rich sporting culture with a strong emphasis on water sports. In fact, the country has hosted several international rowing competitions, including the European Rowing Championships.
That's impressive. Leo, and I've heard that Hungary has a lot to offer when it comes to hiking and trekking. The country's scenic landscapes and diverse wildlife make it a paradise for outdoor enthusiasts.
Absolutely. Mira, and have you heard about the Danube River, which runs through Hungary? It's a popular destination for boat tours and water sports, including kayaking and stand-up paddleboarding.
The Danube River is a beautiful sight, and I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the sports and activities they can enjoy in Estonia and Hungary. So, if you're planning a trip to either of these countries, what should you do first?
Well, Mira, I think you should start by researching the local sports and activities that interest you. Whether it's hiking, cycling, or water sports, there's something for everyone in Estonia and Hungary.
That's great advice, Leo. And I'm sure our listeners would also appreciate some insider tips on the best places to visit and the most popular sports and activities in each country.
I'm happy to share some insider tips. Yeah, for example, in Estonia, you should definitely visit the Lahemaa National Park, which is home to a wide range of wildlife, including bears and wolves.
And in Hungary, I've heard that the Shetland town is a must-visit destination for outdoor enthusiasts. It's a charming town with a rich history and a beautiful natural setting.
That's right, Mira. And speaking of natural beauty, have you heard about the Széchenyi thermal bath in Budapest, Hungary? It's a stunning example of natural architecture and a great place to relax and unwind after a long day of hiking or cycling.
Oh, that sounds like a great way to relax. Leo, and I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the thermal baths in Hungary. So, what's the best way to experience the thermal baths in Hungary?
Well, Mira, I think the best way to experience the thermal baths in Hungary is to visit the Széchenyi thermal bath in Budapest. It's a world-famous bath that offers a unique and relaxing experience.
That sounds like a great experience, Leo. And I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the thermal baths in Hungary. So, if you're planning a trip to Hungary, what's the best time to visit?
That's a great question. Mira, the best time to visit Hungary depends on your interests and the activities you want to do. However, if you're interested in hiking and trekking, I would recommend visiting Hungary in the spring or summer, when the weather is warm and sunny.
That's great advice, Leo. And I'm sure our listeners would appreciate some insider tips on the best places to visit and the most popular sports and activities in Hungary.
I'm happy to share some insider tips. Mira, for example, in Hungary, you should definitely visit the Lake Balaton, which is the largest lake in Central Europe and a popular destination for water sports.
And in Estonia, I've heard that the Hiiumaa Island is a must-visit destination for outdoor enthusiasts. It's a beautiful island with a rich history and a stunning natural setting.
That's right, Mira. And speaking of natural beauty, have you heard about the Lahemaa National Park in Estonia? It's a stunning example of natural architecture and a great place to relax and unwind after a long day of hiking or cycling.
That sounds like a great way to relax, Leo. And I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the national parks in Estonia. So, what's the best way to experience the national parks in Estonia?
Well, Mira, I think the best way to experience the national parks in Estonia is to visit the Lahemaa National Park, which is home to a wide range of wildlife, including bears and wolves.
That sounds like a great experience, Leo. And I'm sure our listeners would appreciate some insider tips on the best places to visit and the most popular sports and activities in Estonia.
I'm happy to share some insider tips. Mira, for example, in Estonia, you should definitely visit the Tallinn Botanical Garden, which is a beautiful and peaceful oasis in the heart of the city.
And in Hungary, I've heard that the Tallinn National Park is a must-visit destination for outdoor enthusiasts. It's a stunning example of natural beauty and a great place to relax and unwind.
That's right, Mira. And speaking of natural beauty, have you heard about the Danube River, which runs through Hungary? It's a popular destination for boat tours and water sports, including kayaking and stand-up paddle boarding.
That sounds like a great way to experience the Danube River, Leo. And I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the water sports in Hungary.
Well, Mira, I think the best way to experience the water sports in Hungary is to visit the Danube River and take a boat tour or rent a kayak or paddleboard.
That sounds like a great experience, Leo. And I'm sure our listeners would appreciate some insider tips on the best places to visit and the most popular sports and activities in Hungary.
I'm happy to share some insider tips. Mira, for example, in Hungary, you should definitely visit the Shenton town, which is a charming and historic.
So Estonia's got a unique nightlife vibe going on. All about those electronic clubs and secret parties hidden in the woods. It's like they're saying, come and find us, but we're not telling you where.
Yes. And Hungary's got its own share of wild nights, especially in Budapest. The ruined bars are a must-visit, with their eclectic decorations and cheap drinks. It's like stumbling into a time capsule, but with better cocktails.
I know, right? But Estonia's got this underground scene that's all about creativity and self-expression. They're not just about the party. They're about the art and music that comes with it.
That's true. But Hungary's got its own brand of hedonism, especially when it comes to wine. You can find some amazing wine bars and festivals, like the Széchenyi Wine Festival, which is like a mini vacation from the city.
Wine festivals. That sounds like a blast. But Estonia's got its own take on that, with the Tall and Music Week, which brings together musicians and music lovers from all over the world.
Ah, yes. And Hungary's got its own music scene, with the Budapest Spring Festival showcasing classical music, jazz, and even pop. It's like a cultural explosion. And I'm not just saying that because I love classical music.
Well, I think our listeners would agree that music is a big part of both countries' nightlife scenes. But let's talk about something a bit more unusual.
Oh, you mean like Estonia's got a secret society of ghost hunters who throw parties in abandoned buildings?
Well, not exactly. But Hungary's got its own share of spooky stories, like the legend of the White Lady of Eager. It's like a ghostly apparition that haunts the city's wine cellars.
Ah, yes. And Estonia's got its own take on that, with the Estonian folk tales about the Volva, a female spirit who's said to appear in the woods. It's like a mystical connection to the natural world.
I love it when you get all mystical on me, Leo. But seriously, both countries have a rich cultural heritage that's reflected in their nightlife scenes.
Absolutely. And I think our listeners would agree that both Estonia and Hungary have something unique to offer when it comes to nightlife and entertainment. Whether it's electronic clubs, wine festivals, or ghostly apparitions, there's always something to explore and discover.
So, if you're planning a trip to either country, what would you say is a must-see or must-do experience?
That's a tough one. But I think for Estonia, it's got to be the Tallinn Old Town, with its colorful buildings and medieval charm. And for Hungary, it's got to be the Széchenyi thermal bath, with its stunning architecture and relaxing atmosphere.
Oh, I'm sure our listeners would agree that both of those are must-sees. And don't forget to check out the local cuisine. Like Estonia's famous Very Vorst or Hungary's line goes.
Ah, yes. And don't forget to try the local beer. Like Estonia's A, the COQ or Hungary's Dre. It's like a taste of the country in a glass.
Well, I think that's all the time we have for tonight. Thanks for joining us. And don't forget to leave your comments and suggestions in the comments section below.
Absolutely. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like to discuss, feel free to reach out to us on social media. Until next time, goodbye and good night from Estonia and Hungary.
I'm sure our listeners know that family-friendly environments are crucial for a country's overall well-being. And today, we're going to explore Estonia and Hungary to see which one excels in this department. Estonia, being a Nordic country, is known for its modern and efficient society. But how does it fare when it comes to family-friendly environments?
Ah, great question. Mira, Estonia has made significant strides in creating family-friendly environments. In fact, it has been ranked as one of the top countries in the world for work-life balance. They have implemented policies like flexible working hours, parental leave, and affordable childcare, making it easier for parents to balance work and family life.
That's amazing. And I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the types of activities available for kids in Estonia. What about museums, parks, and other attractions that cater to families?
Ah, yes. Estonia has a plethora of family-friendly attractions. The Estonian Open Air Museum, for example, is a must-visit for families. It showcases traditional Estonian architecture and offers a variety of activities for kids, including crafts, games, and even a mini train ride. And let's not forget about the beautiful parks and nature reserves, like the Lahema National Park, which offers hiking trails, bike routes, and picnic areas for families to enjoy.
I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the educational system in Estonia as well. How does it compare to other countries? And what kind of support does it offer to families?
Well, Estonia's education system is highly regarded, and it offers a lot of support to families. The country has implemented a comprehensive education system that includes preschool education, primary education, and secondary education. The system is designed to be inclusive and supportive, with a focus on individualized learning and social-emotional development. And, as an added bonus, Estonia offers a range of extracurricular activities and programs for kids. such as music, arts, and sports, which are all free of charge.
Wow, that sounds incredible. And I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about Hungary's family-friendly environment. How does it compare to Estonia's?
Hungary is a great country for families as well. While it may not have the same level of modernity as Estonia, Hungary has a rich cultural heritage and a strong focus on family values. The country has a range of family-friendly attractions, including the Széchenyi thermal bath, which is a great place for families to relax and unwind. And let's not forget about the beautiful Lake Balaton, which offers a range of water sports and activities for kids to enjoy.
I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about Hungary's education system as well. How does it compare to Estonia's?
Well, Hungary's education system is also highly regarded, and it offers a lot of support to families. The country has a comprehensive education system that includes preschool education, primary education, and secondary education. The system is designed to be inclusive and supportive, with a focus on individualized learning and social-emotional development. And, as an added bonus, Hungary offers a range of extracurricular activities and programs for kids, such as music, arts, and sports, which are all free of charge.
So, it seems like both Estonia and Hungary have a lot to offer when it comes to family-friendly environments and children's activities. But which one do you think is the clear winner?
That's a tough question. Mira, while both countries have their strengths and weaknesses, I think Estonia's modern and efficient society gives it a slight edge. But at the end of the day, it's all about what works best for each individual family.
Absolutely. And I'm sure our listeners would love to share their thoughts and experiences with us. So, please do leave a comment below and let us know which country you prefer and why. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this.
And if you're planning a family vacation to either Estonia or Hungary, be sure to check out our next episode, where we'll be discussing the best family-friendly accommodations and activities in both countries. Until then, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.
So, let's dive into the LGBT-friendly atmosphere in Estonia and Hungary. I'm sure our listeners living in these countries would agree with me that inclusivity and acceptance are essential for a thriving community.
Estonia's capital, Tallinn, hosts a vibrant pride parade, and I'm told it's one of the best in the region. But I'm curious, Mira, have you ever been to a pride event that's more, let's say, spirited?
Oh, Leo, you're such a card. But seriously, Estonia's progress in LGBT rights is impressive. They've implemented anti-discrimination laws and have a strong focus on education and awareness.
That's true. But what about Hungary? I've heard their laws are a bit more complicated. Can you walk us through the situation there, Mira?
Well, Hungary has made some strides in recent years, but there's still a long way to go. The government has introduced anti-LGBT propaganda laws, which has led to concerns about censorship and freedom of expression.
That's not exactly what I wanted to hear. But I'm sure our listeners are curious about how this affects the community. Mira, have you spoken to any locals about their experiences?
Actually, yes. I've talked to several people, and they shared some heart-wrenching stories about facing discrimination and marginalization. But they've also expressed their determination to keep pushing for change and acceptance.
That's really inspiring. Mira, I'm sure our listeners are nodding along with us right now. But let's not forget about the good stuff. Estonia has a thriving LGBT community, with many organizations and events promoting inclusivity and acceptance.
Exactly. And Estonia's government has also taken steps to address the issue of hate crimes against LGBT individuals. They've implemented measures to improve reporting and support for victims.
And I'm sure our listeners are eager to know more about Hungary's community. Mira, can you tell us about some of the initiatives and organizations working to promote LGBT rights in Hungary?
Oh, yes. There are several organizations, like the Hungarian LGBT advocacy group, HATA, which is working tirelessly to promote education, awareness, and acceptance.
That's great to hear. And I'm sure our listeners are curious about what they can do to support these efforts. Mira, what advice would you give to our listeners who want to make a positive impact?
Well, I'd say start by educating yourself about the issues in the community. Then, get involved with local organizations and events that promote inclusivity and acceptance. And, of course, always be an ally and a friend to those in the LGBT community.
That's fantastic advice, Mira. And I'm sure our listeners are eager to know more about the cultural attitudes towards LGBT individuals in both countries. Mira, can you tell us about some of the cultural differences you've noticed?
Yes. In Estonia, I've noticed that there's a strong sense of community and acceptance, especially in larger cities like Tallinn. But in Hungary, I've noticed that there's still a bit of a divide, with some people being more open-minded and others being more conservative.
That's really interesting, Mira. And I'm sure our listeners are curious about what they can do to promote cultural change. Mira, what do you think is the most important step in creating a more inclusive and accepting society?
Well, I think it's all about education and awareness. By learning about and understanding different cultures and perspectives, we can break down barriers and build bridges. And, of course, always be open to listening and learning from others.
That's wonderful advice, Mira. And I'm sure our listeners are eager to know more about the future of LGBT rights in both countries. Mira, what do you see as the biggest challenges and opportunities for the LGBT community in Estonia and Hungary?
Oh, that's a great question. Leo, I think the biggest challenge is still addressing the issue of hate, crimes, and discrimination. But I also see opportunities for growth and change, especially with the rise of social media and online activism.
Wow, that's really inspiring, Mira. And I'm sure our listeners are eager to know more about how they can get involved and support the LGBT community in both countries. Mira, what final advice would you give to our listeners?
Well, I'd say be an ally, be a friend, and always be open to learning and growing. And, of course, always remember that love is love, no matter where you come from or what your background is.
That's fantastic advice, Mira. And I'm sure our listeners are eager to know more about the resources and organizations working to promote LGBT rights in both countries. Mira, can you tell us about some of the organizations and resources that our listeners can turn to?
Yes. There are several organizations, like the Estonian LGBT advocacy group, LGBT, which is working tirelessly to promote education, awareness, and acceptance. And in Hungary, there's the Hungarian LGBT advocacy group, which is also doing great work.
That's great to hear. And I'm sure our listeners are curious about what they can do to support these efforts. Mira, what final words of encouragement would you give to our listeners who want to make a positive impact?
Well, I'd say start by being an ally and a friend to those in the LGBT community. Then, get involved with local organizations and events that promote inclusivity and acceptance. And always remember that every small action counts, and every voice matters.
That's wonderful advice, Mira. And I'm sure our listeners are eager to know more about the future of LGBT rights in both countries. Mira, what do you see as the biggest opportunities for growth and change in the LGBT community in Estonia and Hungary?
That's a great question. Leo, I think the biggest opportunity is still to create a more inclusive and accepting society, where everyone can feel welcome and valued. And, of course, always be open to learning and growing.
Wow, that's really inspiring, Mira. And I'm sure our listeners are eager to know more about how they can get involved and support the LGBT community in both countries. Mira, it's kind of like to say, what final advice would you give to our listeners?
Well, I'd say be an ally, be a friend, and always be open to learning and growing. And Of course. Always remember that love is love, no matter where you come from or what your background is.
That's fantastic advice, Mira. And I'm sure our listeners are eager to know more.
Let's talk about hospitality in Estonia. I'm curious to know, Leo, how Estonians make visitors feel at home.
Ah, great question. Mira, Estonians are generally very welcoming, and you'll often find that they're eager to share their culture with foreigners. But what's interesting is that they also have a unique way of showing hospitality, which is more about subtlety than grand gestures.
I see what you mean. I've heard that Estonians tend to be more reserved at first, but once you get to know them, they open up and become great hosts. It's like they're saying, "Come, let's get to know you, but don't expect us to be too flashy about it."
Exactly. And it's not just about the people. Even the architecture and design of Estonian spaces are often minimalist and unpretentious, which reflects the country's laid-back attitude.
I love that. And speaking of laid back, have you ever noticed that Estonians seem to have a great sense of humor about themselves? Like, they're not afraid to poke fun at their own culture and traditions.
Oh, absolutely. Estonians have a wicked sense of humor, and they're always willing to laugh at themselves. In fact, I've heard that they even have a phrase, "Eesti UKS, Paxby UKS," which roughly translates to Estonia is a big. That's odd. It's a joke about how they're not taking themselves too seriously.
That's amazing. I'm sure our listeners living in Estonia would agree with me that humor is a big part of the country's charm. And I'm curious, Leo, what about Hungary? How do Hungarians approach hospitality?
Well, Hungarians are known for being warm and welcoming, especially in the countryside. They have a saying, "Es azen fadj," which means we welcome you with open arms. And it's not just about the words. Hungarians are also known for their generous hospitality, often inviting strangers into their homes for a meal or a drink.
That sounds wonderful. I've heard that Hungarians are also very proud of their cultural heritage, and they love sharing it with visitors. Like, they'll often invite you to join them for a traditional meal or a folk dance performance.
Exactly. Hungarians are passionate about their culture, and they're always eager to share it with others. And it's not just about the culture. Hungarians are also very proud of their history and their national identity.
I see what you mean. And speaking of history, I've heard that Hungary has a rich tradition of folk music and dance. Have you ever been to a Hungarian folk dance performance? Leo?
Oh, yes. I've been to a few, and they're always a lot of fun. The energy is infectious, and the music and dance are just amazing. And what's interesting is that Hungarians often use folk music and dance as a way of connecting with their heritage and their national identity.
That's so cool. I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. Have you ever been to a traditional Hungarian folk dance performance? And what was your experience like?
Well, I've been to a few, and I can tell you that it's always a wild ride. But seriously, it's a great way to experience Hungarian culture and hospitality.
I'm sure our listeners would love to hear more about your experiences. And speaking of experiences, I'm curious to know, Leo, how Hungarians approach integration and making foreigners feel at home.
Well, Hungarians are generally very welcoming, but they also have a strong sense of community and tradition. So, when it comes to integration, they often try to balance the need to preserve their cultural heritage with the need to adapt to changing circumstances.
I see what you mean. And speaking of adapting to changing circumstances, I heard that Estonia is also going through a period of rapid change and modernization. How do you think that's affecting Estonian hospitality and attitudes towards foreigners?
Ah, great question. Mira, Estonia is indeed undergoing a lot of changes, and it's affecting the way Estonians approach hospitality. For example, with the rise of tourism, Estonians are becoming more aware of the need to cater to foreign visitors and make them feel at home.
That's so true. And I'm sure our listeners living in Estonia would agree with me that it's not just about catering to tourists. It's also about creating a sense of community and connection with foreigners.
Absolutely. And I think that's where Estonia's unique approach to hospitality comes in. It's not just about grand gestures or fancy hotels. It's about creating a sense of belonging and connection with others.
I love that. And finally, I'm curious to know, Leo, what do you think is the key to creating a welcoming and inclusive culture in both Estonia and Hungary?
Great question. Mira, I think the key is to strike a balance between preserving cultural heritage and adapting to changing circumstances. It's about creating a sense of community and connection with others, while also being open to new ideas and perspectives.
I couldn't agree more. Leo, and I think that's a great note to end on. Thanks for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. Let's dive into Estonia's internet infrastructure and digital facilities. It's one of the most digitally advanced countries in the world, with a high-speed internet connection available almost everywhere. I'm curious to know, Leo, what makes Estonia's internet so unique?
Great question. Mira, Estonia's digital infrastructure is built on top of the X-Road network, a secure data exchange system that connects all public services and databases. It's like a digital hub that provides a seamless online experience for citizens and businesses alike. Plus, Estonia has a strong focus on e-government, making it easy for people to access public services online.
That's fascinating. I'm sure our listeners would agree that having access to public services online is a game changer. And speaking of game changers, Estonia has also been a pioneer in digital nomad culture. Have you heard about the digital nomad visa that Estonia offers?
Yes. The Digital Nomad Visa is a fantastic initiative that allows remote workers to live and work in Estonia for up to a year. It's a great way for digital nomads to experience the country's unique digital landscape and culture. And, of course, Estonia's capital, Tallinn, is a hub for tech startups and innovation.
That's so cool. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the digital nomad scene in Estonia. And, Leo, I'm curious to know, what's the most impressive digital facility you've seen in Estonia?
That's a tough one. But I'd say the most impressive digital facility I've seen is the Estonian National Digital Archives, which stores over 1.5 million digital documents and records. It's an incredible feat of digital preservation and innovation.
Wow, that's impressive. I'm sure our listeners would agree that preserving digital records is crucial for the future. And speaking of the future, Estonia is also a leader in artificial intelligence and robotics. Have you heard about the Estonian AI Research Center?
Yes. The Estonian AI Research Center is a hub for AI innovation and research, with a focus on developing AI solutions for healthcare, education, and other industries. It's an exciting area of research and development, and Estonia is at the forefront of it.
That's fascinating. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about AI research in Estonia. And, Leo, I'm curious to know, what's the most surprising thing you've learned about Estonia's digital infrastructure?
I'd say the most surprising thing I've learned is that Estonia has a strong focus on digital literacy and education. They offer online courses and training programs to help people develop the skills they need to thrive in a digital economy. It's a great way to ensure that everyone has access to the digital tools and resources they need.
That's amazing. I'm sure our listeners would agree that digital literacy is essential for the future. And speaking of the future, Estonia is also a leader in 5G technology. Have you heard about the 5G trials in Estonia?
Yes. Estonia is one of the first countries to launch 5G trials, with a focus on developing 5G solutions for industries like healthcare, transportation, and education. It's an exciting area of research and development, and Estonia is at the forefront of it.
That's impressive. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about 5G trials in Estonia. And, Leo, I'm curious to know, what's the most important thing you think our listeners should take away from this conversation about Estonia's digital infrastructure?
I'd say the most important thing is that Estonia's digital infrastructure is built on a foundation of innovation, education, and community. They're not just building digital facilities. They're building a digital society that benefits everyone.
That's so well said. Leo, and speaking of building a digital society, let's move on to Hungary and see how their internet infrastructure and digital facilities compare.
Ah, great idea. Mira, Hungary has made significant strides in digital development, with a focus on e-government and digital education. But, I have to say, I'm a bit by the lack of innovation in Hungary's digital landscape compared to Estonia.
Ah, interesting. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the differences between Estonia and Hungary's digital landscapes. Leo, I'm curious to know, what do you think is the most important factor that's holding back Hungary's digital development?
I'd say it's the lack of investment in digital infrastructure and education. Hungary needs to prioritize digital literacy and education to ensure that everyone has access to the digital tools and resources they need.
That's a great point. Leo, and speaking of investment, Hungary has made significant investments in its digital infrastructure, including the development of a national broadband network.
Yes. The National Broadband Network is a great initiative, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. Hungary needs to focus on developing a more comprehensive digital strategy that includes education, innovation, and community engagement.
That's a great point. And speaking of community engagement, Hungary has a strong focus on community development and social inclusion. Have you heard about the Hungarian government's initiative to provide digital skills training to underprivileged communities?
Yes. The initiative is a great step towards promoting digital inclusion and social mobility. But, I have to say, I'm a bit concerned about the lack of transparency and accountability in Hungary's digital landscape.
Interesting. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the transparency and accountability issues in Hungary's digital landscape. And, Leah, I'm curious to know, what do you think is the most important thing that Hungary can do to improve its digital infrastructure?
I'd say it's to prioritize digital literacy and education, and to invest in digital innovation and research. Hungary needs to focus on developing a more comprehensive digital strategy that includes education, innovation, and community engagement.
That's a great point. And speaking of digital literacy, Hungary has a strong focus on digital education and training. Have you heard about the Hungarian government's initiative to provide digital skills training to students and adults?
Yes. The initiative is a great step towards promoting digital literacy and skills development. But, I have to say, I'm a bit concerned about the lack of resources and funding for digital education and training in Hungary.
Interesting. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the resources and funding issues in Hungary's digital education and training programs. And, Leah, I'm curious to know, what do you think is the most important thing that Hungary can do to promote digital education and training?
I'd say it's to invest in digital infrastructure and education, and to prioritize digital literacy and skills development. Hungary needs to focus on developing a more comprehensive digital strategy that includes education, innovation, and community engagement.
That's a great point. Leo, and speaking of community engagement, Hungary has. I'm so to dive into the world of shopping in Estonia and Hungary. Both countries have a rich retail culture, but I'm curious. Leo, have you ever been to a traditional Estonian market?
Actually, I have. And let me tell you, it was a sensory overload in the best possible way. The smell of freshly baked pastries, the sound of vendors calling out their daily specials. It was like a taste of heaven. But, I have to say, I was a bit overwhelmed by the prices. I mean, a simple pastry could cost upwards of €5.
Ouch. That does sound steep. But I think we have to consider the quality and uniqueness of these markets. I mean, where else can you find handmade crafts and local specialties? And I'm sure our listeners would agree with me. The experience is worth the price.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes Estonia's markets so special. The combination of tradition and modernity creates a unique shopping experience that's hard to find elsewhere. But what about Hungary? I've heard their markets are quite famous for their, let's say, aggressive vendors.
Yes, the Hungarian market experience is definitely not for the faint of heart. But, in all seriousness, the markets in Hungary are a treasure trove of local goods and souvenirs. And I found that the prices are often much more reasonable than in Estonia. I mean, a beautiful handmade scarf can cost as little as 10 euros.
Wow, that's a great point, Mira. And I think it's worth noting that Hungary has a much more developed shopping culture than Estonia. With its many malls and shopping centers, Hungary offers a wide range of shopping options for tourists and locals alike.
That's true. But I think Estonia is catching up quickly. With its modern shopping centers and trendy boutiques, Estonia is becoming a shopper's paradise. And I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the shopping scene in both countries. So, Leo, tell me, what's your favorite shopping destination in Estonia?
That's a tough one. But I think my favorite shopping destination in Estonia is the Roterman Quarter in Tallinn. It's a beautiful old town with a mix of modern and traditional shops and restaurants. And the best part is, it's all within walking distance.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And I think our listeners would love to know more about the shopping scene in Hungary. So, Leo, what's your favorite shopping destination in Hungary?
That's an easy one. My favorite shopping destination in Hungary is the Váci Street in Budapest. It's a world-famous shopping street with a mix of high-end boutiques and local markets. And the best part is, it's right in the heart of the city.
Oh, I can see why you'd love that. And I'm sure our listeners would agree with me. The shopping experience in both countries is unique and exciting in its own way. But what about the price-performance balance? I mean, is it worth splurging on some of the more expensive items in Estonia?
That's a great question, Mira. And I think the answer is, it depends. If you're looking for unique, high-quality items, then yes, it's worth splurging. But if you're on a budget, then maybe not. And I think that's where Hungary comes in. With its more affordable prices and wide range of shopping options, Hungary is a shopper's paradise for those on a budget.
Well, that's a great point, Leo. And I think our listeners would love to know more about the shopping scene in both countries. So, let's ask our listeners, have you ever shopped in Estonia or Hungary? What was your experience like? Share your stories with us in the comments below.
And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more exciting content about Estonia and Hungary. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like to discuss, please let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.
And so to talk about Estonia and Hungary's cultural events, festivals, and concert opportunities, let's dive right in. Estonia has a rich cultural calendar, with many UNESCO-recognized sites like the Song Festival grounds and the 2MP Castle. But have you guys heard about the Estonian Music and Drama Festival? It's a massive celebration of classical music and dance.
Yes, I've been to Estonia, and I can attest to the beauty of the Song Festival grounds. It's like a giant amphitheater in the middle of the forest, and the Estonian Music and Drama Festival is indeed a highlight of the cultural calendar. But let's not forget about Hungary's rich cultural heritage. Have you heard about the Sziget Festival in Budapest?
Sziget Festival? That sounds familiar. I've heard it's one of the largest music festivals in Europe. I'm certain that our listeners living in Hungary would agree with me that Sziget is a must-attend event. But what about Estonia's music scene? I've heard that Estonia has a thriving indie rock scene, with many talented musicians emerging from the city of Tallinn.
Yes. Estonia's indie rock scene is indeed thriving. And Tallinn is a great city to experience the local music scene. But let's not forget about Hungary's folk music traditions. Hungary has a rich cultural heritage of folk music, with many traditional instruments like the cymbalum and the hurdy-gurdy.
I love folk music. I've always been fascinated by the cymbalum. But what about Estonia's folk music traditions? I've heard that Estonia has a unique blend of folk music and modern influences.
Ah, yes. Estonia's folk music scene is indeed unique. And it's not just about traditional folk music. Estonia has a thriving music scene with many modern influences, from electronic to indie rock. And let's not forget about Hungary's classical music heritage. Hungary has produced many world-renowned classical musicians, like Franz Liszt and Erno Donogny.
Ah, I love classical music. I've always been a fan of Liszt's piano music. But what about Estonia's classical music scene? I've heard that Estonia has a thriving classical music scene, with many talented musicians emerging from the country.
Oh, yes. Estonia's classical music scene is indeed thriving. And it's not just about classical music. Estonia has a rich cultural heritage of music, from folk to classical to modern influences. And let's not forget about Hungary's cultural events and festivals. Hungary has a rich calendar of cultural events, from the Budapest Spring Festival to the Debrecen Summer Festival.
Ah, I love the Budapest Spring Festival. I've always been fascinated by the city's rich cultural heritage. But what about Estonia's cultural events and festivals? I've heard that Estonia has a unique blend of cultural events, from music festivals to food festivals.
Ah, yes. Estonia's cultural events and festivals are indeed unique. And it's not just about cultural events. Estonia has a thriving art scene, with many galleries and museums showcasing local and international art. And let's not forget about Hungary's rich cultural traditions. Hungary has a rich cultural heritage of folk music, dance, and crafts.
Ah, I love folk music and dance. I've always been fascinated by the Hungarian folk dance traditions. But what about Estonia's cultural traditions? I've heard that Estonia has a unique blend of cultural traditions, from folk music to modern influences.
Ah, yes. Estonia's cultural traditions are indeed unique. And it's not just about cultural traditions. Estonia has a thriving cultural scene, with many cultural events and festivals throughout the year. And let's not forget about Hungary's UNESCO-recognized sites, like the Buda Castle and the Széchenyi Thermal Bath.
Ah, I love the Buda Castle. I've always been fascinated by the castle's rich history. But what about Estonia's UNESCO-recognized sites? I've heard that Estonia has many UNESCO-recognized sites, from the 2MP Castle to the Song Festival grounds.
Ah, yes. Estonia's UNESCO-recognized sites are indeed unique. And it's not just about UNESCO-recognized sites. Estonia has a rich cultural heritage of music, dance, and crafts, with many cultural events and festivals throughout the year. For more, check out Genov AI for the latest cultural trends.
Oh, I'll definitely check out Jetov AI for more information. And I'm sure our listeners would agree with me that both Estonia and Hungary have a rich cultural heritage that is worth exploring. Thanks for joining us today.
Ah, it was a pleasure discussing cultural events and festivals with Mira. And I'm sure our listeners would agree with me that both Estonia and Hungary are great destinations for music lovers. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more cultural insights and travel tips. We're on Jetov AI, so be sure to check us out. I'm to dive into the opportunities of learning the local language in Estonia and Hungary. Both countries have their unique approaches to language education, and I'm curious to see how they support newcomers in mastering the local tongue.
That's a great point. Mira, Estonia, for instance, has a well-structured language education system with a strong emphasis on grammar and vocabulary. They also offer language courses for foreigners, which are designed to be engaging and interactive.
I've heard that Estonia has a great reputation for its language schools, and many of them offer specialized courses for foreigners. But what about Hungary? Leo, how does it compare in terms of language education?
Hungary has a more relaxed approach to language education, with a focus on conversational skills and cultural immersion. They also offer language courses for foreigners, but with a more flexible schedule and format.
I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. Do you think a more relaxed approach to language education is beneficial for learners? Or do you prefer a more structured approach like Estonia's?
That's a great question. Mira, I think it really depends on the individual learner. Some people prefer a more structured approach, while others prefer a more relaxed and flexible approach.
That's a good point. Leo? And what about cultural immersion? Leo, how does Hungary's cultural immersion program compare to Estonia's?
Hungary's cultural immersion program is quite extensive, with many opportunities for learners to practice their language skills in real-life situations. They also offer cultural events and festivals that are open to learners, which is a great way to experience the local culture.
I'm certain that our listeners living in Hungary would agree with me that cultural immersion is a crucial part of language learning. But what about linguistic challenges? How do Estonia and Hungary handle linguistic challenges for learners?
Both countries have their own way of handling linguistic challenges, but Estonia's approach is more formal and structured. They offer language courses that focus on grammar and vocabulary, which can help learners overcome linguistic challenges.
I think it's interesting that Estonia's approach is more formal and structured, while Hungary's approach is more relaxed and flexible. But what about language learning resources? Leo, how do Estonia and Hungary support learners in finding the right resources?
Both countries have a wealth of language learning resources available, including online courses, language exchange programs, and cultural events. Estonia also has a number of language schools that offer specialized courses for foreigners.
That's great to hear. Leo, and what about language exchange programs? Leo, how do Estonia and Hungary support learners in finding language exchange partners?
Both countries have a number of language exchange programs available, which can help learners practice their language skills in real-life situations. Hungary's language exchange program is particularly well organized, with many opportunities for learners to practice their language skills.
I'm impressed by the number of language exchange programs available in both countries. But what about the cost of language education? Leo, how do Estonia and Hungary compare in terms of cost?
Estonia is generally more expensive than Hungary when it comes to language education, but both countries offer affordable options for learners. Hungary's language schools, for instance, offer a more affordable option for learners.
I think it's great that both countries offer affordable options for learners. Leo, and what about the quality of language education? Leo, how do Estonia and Hungary compare in terms of quality?
Both countries have a high standard of language education, but Estonia's language schools are generally more highly regarded. They also have a more rigorous evaluation process, which ensures that learners receive a high-quality education.
I'm impressed by the high standard of language education in both countries. Leo, but what about the role of technology in language education? Leo, how do Estonia and Hungary use technology to support learners?
Both countries use technology to support learners in a number of ways, including online language courses and language exchange programs. Estonia also uses technology to provide learners with access to a range of language learning resources.
I think it's great that both countries are using technology to support learners. Leo, and what about the importance of language learning? Leo, why is it so important to learn the local language in Estonia and Hungary?
Language learning is essential for anyone living in or traveling to a foreign country. It allows learners to communicate effectively, navigate everyday situations, and appreciate the local culture.
I couldn't agree more. Leo. And finally, I'd like to ask our listeners, what are your experiences with language learning in Estonia and Hungary? Do you have any tips or advice for learners?
That's a great question, Mia. I think it's always helpful to get advice from people who have been in the learner's shoes. Our listeners may have valuable insights to share, so let's hear from them.
So, let's dive into the world of safety and comfort for women travelers. I've got to say, I'm curious about Estonia's approach to this. Have you ever heard of the country's efforts to create a safe and welcoming environment for women?
Yes. Estonia has made some great strides in this area. For example, they've implemented a nationwide campaign to raise awareness about street harassment and assault. It's amazing to see a country taking proactive steps to address these issues.
That's fantastic. And I'm sure our listeners living in Estonia would agree with me. But what about Hungary? How does it compare in terms of safety and comfort for women travelers?
Hungary has a slightly different approach. While they don't have the same level of awareness campaigns as Estonia, they do have a strong focus on community-based initiatives to support women's safety. For example, there are many women's organizations and community groups working to provide resources and support for women who have experienced harassment or assault.
I see. So, it seems like Estonia is taking a more proactive approach, while Hungary is relying on community-based initiatives. But what about personal experiences? Have you or I, or any of our listeners, had any experiences with safety and comfort in these countries?
Actually, I have a friend who traveled to Estonia and had a really positive experience. She said the locals were very friendly and welcoming, and she felt safe walking around the city at night. Of course, it's always important to exercise caution, but it sounds like Estonia is a great destination for women travelers.
That's great to hear. And I'm sure our listeners would love to hear more about our experiences. So Leo, what about Hungary? Have you or any of our listeners had any experiences with safety and comfort in Hungary?
Well, I've had a few friends who have traveled to Hungary and had some mixed experiences. While they generally felt safe, there were a few incidents of harassment or catcalling. But overall, it seems like Hungary is a bit of a mixed bag when it comes to safety and comfort for women travelers.
I see. So, it seems like both countries have their strengths and weaknesses when it comes to safety and comfort for women travelers. But what about cultural attitudes towards women's safety? Are there any differences between Estonia and Hungary?
Yes. I think there are some interesting differences between the two countries. In Estonia, there seems to be a strong emphasis on equality and women's rights, which is reflected in their laws and policies. In contrast, Hungary has a more complex history when it comes to women's rights, and there are still some issues with sexism and misogyny in the country.
That's really interesting. I think it's great that Estonia is prioritizing women's safety and equality, and I'm sure our listeners would agree with me. But what about our listeners who are planning to travel to Hungary? What advice would you give them in terms of staying safe and comfortable?
Well, I think it's always a good idea to exercise caution when traveling to any new country. But in Hungary, it's especially important to be aware of your surroundings and to avoid walking alone at night. Also, it's a good idea to learn some basic Hungarian phrases and to connect with local women's groups or organizations who can provide support and resources.
That's great advice, Leah. And I'm sure our listeners would appreciate it. So, let's wrap up this topic by asking our listeners, do you have any experiences or tips to share about safety and comfort for women travelers in Estonia or Hungary? If so, please let us know in the comments below.
Absolutely. And I'm sure our listeners will have some great insights to share. Thanks for tuning into this episode of our podcast, and we'll see you next time.
So, let's dive into the legal systems of Estonia and Hungary. I'm curious, Leo, how do you think their constitutional protections compare?
Great question. Mira, Estonia's constitution is quite detailed, with a focus on individual rights and freedoms. Hungary's constitution, on the other hand, has undergone some changes over the years, with a more emphasis on national sovereignty.
I see what you mean. Estonia's constitution guarantees the right to privacy, while Hungary's is being criticized for limiting certain rights, like freedom of the press. Do you think this reflects a cultural difference between the two countries?
That's a good point. Mira, Estonia's history as a Soviet republic has influenced its approach to individual rights, whereas Hungary's experience under communism has led to a more nuanced approach to freedom of speech in the press.
That's really interesting. I'm certain that our listeners living in Hungary would agree with me that the country's media landscape is quite complex. What do you think is the most significant challenge facing Hungary's media outlets?
Well, Mira, I think it's the increasing polarization of the media landscape, with some outlets being accused of promoting nationalist or extremist views. It's a concern that's not unique to Hungary, but it does pose a challenge to the country's commitment to free speech and the free press.
I completely agree. Leo, and speaking of free speech, what do you think about the recent changes to Hungary's hate speech laws? I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this.
Ah, great topic. Mira, the changes to Hungary's hate speech laws have been met with controversy, with some arguing that they restrict freedom of expression while others see them as a necessary step to protect vulnerable groups. I think it's a complex issue that requires careful consideration.
I see what you mean. Leo, and what about Estonia's approach to hate speech? I've heard that the country has a more robust system for addressing hate crimes and hate speech.
That's right. Mira, Estonia has a strong tradition of promoting tolerance and respect for diversity, and its laws reflect that commitment. The country's approach to hate speech is more proactive, with a focus on education and prevention rather than just punishment.
I'm impressed. Leo, and what about the role of the judiciary in both countries? Do you think the courts in Estonia and Hungary are independent and impartial?
Great question. Mira, both countries have a strong tradition of judicial independence. But there have been concerns raised about the influence of politics on the judiciary in Hungary. In Estonia, the judiciary is generally seen as independent and impartial, but there are always areas for improvement.
I see what you mean. Leo, and what about the concept of rule of law in both countries? Do you think Estonia and Hungary have a strong commitment to the rule of law?
That's a good question. Mira, Estonia has a strong tradition of respect for the rule of law, with a clear and transparent system for enforcing laws and regulations. Hungary, on the other hand, has faced criticism for its handling of certain cases, with some arguing that the country's commitment to the rule of law is wavering.
I'm not sure I agree with that assessment. Leo, while there have been concerns raised about Hungary's handling of certain cases, I think the country's commitment to the rule of law is still strong. What do you think?
Well, Mira, I think it's a complex issue that requires careful consideration. While Estonia's approach to the rule of law is generally seen as strong, Hungary's has been subject to criticism and controversy. Perhaps we can agree to disagree on this one.
I think that's a great way to end our discussion on the legal systems of Estonia and Hungary. Thank you, Leo, for your insights and perspectives on this topic. If you think this is wrong, please let us know in the comments.
You're welcome. Mira, and thank you to our listeners for joining us on this podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more discussions on the fascinating world of international law.
And so to dive into the world of spa, healthy living, and relaxation opportunities in Estonia and Hungary. Who else loves a good spa day? Guys, let's get started.
I'm already relaxing just about it. Estonia has some amazing spas, especially in the capital city of Tallinn. You can find traditional Finnish saunas, beautiful views of the Baltic Sea, and even some luxurious spa hotels.
That sounds incredible. I'm picturing myself surrounded by candles and soothing music, sipping on a warm glass of glögg. And I'm curious. Leo, have you ever been to a Finnish sauna?
Well, I have to admit, I'm a bit of a sauna newbie, but I've heard it's an essential part of the Estonian culture. I'm sure I'll be a pro by the end of this podcast.
I'm sure you'll be just fine. Leo, and speaking of relaxation, let's talk about the beautiful landscapes of Estonia. The national parks, the forests, the coastlines. It's like a nature lover's paradise.
Absolutely. And Hungary is no slouch when it comes to natural beauty either. From the stunning Lake Balaton to the rolling hills of the Danube region, there's no shortage of breathtaking scenery.
I'm loving the sound of that. Leo, and I'm sure our listeners are too. So, let's talk about the cultural attitudes towards wellness in these two countries. In Estonia, I've heard that there's a strong emphasis on nature and the outdoors.
That's right. Estonians love to get outside and enjoy the fresh air and beautiful scenery. And in Hungary, you'll find a rich tradition of thermal baths and spas, which is perfect for relaxing and rejuvenating.
That's so cool. And I'm curious. Leo, have you ever tried a traditional Hungarian thermal bath?
Actually, I have. And it was an amazing experience. The warm waters and steamy atmosphere were just what I needed to unwind after a long day of traveling.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Leo, And speaking of relaxation, let's talk about some of the unique wellness practices in these two countries. In Estonia, I've heard that there's a growing interest in holistic wellness and alternative therapies.
That's true. Estonians are really embracing the idea of mind-body-spirit connection and looking for ways to balance their physical, emotional, and spiritual health.
I'm so glad to hear that. Leo, and in Hungary, I've heard that there's a strong tradition of natural remedies and herbal medicine.
Ah, yes. Hungarians have been using natural remedies for centuries, and it's amazing to see how effective they can be in promoting overall wellness.
Well, I'm convinced that our listeners are itching to try some of these unique wellness practices for themselves. So, let's talk about some of the resources available to them. In Estonia, I've heard that there are some amazing wellness retreats and spas that cater to international visitors.
That's right. Estonia has a growing tourism industry, and there are many wonderful options for visitors looking to relax and rejuvenate.
And in Hungary, I've heard that there are some amazing thermal baths and spas that are perfect for a relaxing day out.
Ah, yes. Hungary has some of the most beautiful thermal baths in the world, and they're definitely worth a visit.
Well, I think that's all the time we have for today's topic. But, before we go, I want to ask our listeners, have you ever tried a traditional Estonian sauna or Hungarian thermal bath? Share your experiences with us in the comments.
And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more fun and informative episodes like this one.
Thanks for tuning in. Everyone, until next time, stay relaxed and rejuvenated. So, when it comes to Estonia, I was to find that it's a relatively secular country, but with a rich history of religious diversity. From the stunning street, Olaf's church in Tallinn into the beautiful Orthodox churches in Pärnu. There's no shortage of breathtaking architecture.
I completely agree. Mira, Estonia's got a fascinating mix of Christian, Orthodox, and even pagan influences. And have you noticed how many of these churches have been beautifully restored after the Soviet era? It's like a breath of fresh air, isn't it?
Absolutely. Leon. And it's not just about the churches themselves, but also the communities surrounding them. I've heard that Estonia has a strong tradition of folk music and dance, which often accompanies church events. Can you imagine singing hymns with a traditional Estonian folk choir?
Well, I think I'd need a few more cups of coffee before I could attempt that, but I'm sure it would be a unique experience. And speaking of coffee, have you tried the local Estonian coffee? Leo, which is actually a popular brand.
Well, I think we've strayed a bit from the topic, but I'm glad we could have a bit of fun. Seriously though, Estonia's got a very open and tolerant society, which I think is reflected in its approach to faith. I'm curious, Leo, what do you think about the role of the state in promoting or restricting religious freedom?
Ah, excellent question. Mira, from what I've gathered, Estonia has a pretty hands-off approach to faith, which I think is commendable. The state doesn't seem to favor any particular denomination, and people are generally free to practice their faith as they see fit. Of course, there are always some gray areas, but overall, I think Estonia does a great job of striking the balance between freedom and community.
That's really interesting. Leo, and I think it's worth noting that Estonia has a significant minority of Russian speakers, who are mostly Orthodox Christians. How do you think the government handles the needs of these communities?
Ah, great point. Mira, from what I've learned, the Estonian government has made a real effort to recognize and respect the cultural and religious differences of its minority populations. For example, the Orthodox Church is recognized as a state church, and there are even special laws in place to protect the rights of minority groups.
Wow, that's impressive. And I think it's also worth mentioning that Estonia has a thriving community of interfaith organizations and initiatives, which bring people together across different faiths and backgrounds. Can you imagine attending a conference on interfaith dialogue in Tallinn?
Actually, I think I'd be very interested in attending such an event, and I'm sure it would be a great way to learn more about the complexities of faith in Estonia. But tell me, Mira, what about Hungary? How does it compare to Estonia in terms of its approach to faith?
Oh, Hungary is actually a very different story. Leo! While Estonia is relatively secular, Hungary has a strong tradition of Catholicism and is often described as a Catholic country. What do you think about the role of the Catholic Church in Hungarian society?
Great question. Mira, from what I've gathered, the Catholic Church plays a significant role in Hungarian society, particularly in rural areas. However, I've also heard that there are some tensions between the church and the state, particularly with regards to issues like abortion and LGBTQ rights.
That's really interesting. Leo! And I think it's worth noting that Hungary has a very strong tradition of folk culture, which is often deeply rooted in Catholicism. Have you noticed how many Hungarian villages have their own unique folk traditions and customs?
Yes, I've noticed that, and it's really fascinating. But tell me, Mira, how do you think Hungary's approach to faith compares to Estonia's in terms of its impact on everyday life?
That's a great question. Leo, I think Hungary's approach to faith is often more visible and integrated into everyday life, whereas Estonia's approach is more subtle. But I think both countries have their own unique strengths and weaknesses when it comes to faith.
I see what you mean. Mira, and I think it's worth noting that both countries have their own unique approaches to interfaith dialogue and community building. Maybe we can explore that in more depth next time.
Absolutely. Leo! And I think our listeners would love to hear more about the opportunities for interfaith dialogue in Estonia and Hungary. Maybe we can even share some listener stories and experiences in our next episode.
That's a great idea. Mira, and I'm sure our listeners would love to share their own thoughts and experiences on this topic. Thanks for the conversation. Mira.
Thanks for the chat. Leo. And I'm sure our listeners will continue to engage with us on this topic in the comments below. I'm curious, have you ever walked into an event and felt like you're the only one who doesn't understand the language or customs? That's what happened to me in Estonia, where I witnessed a beautiful celebration of the Estonian folk dance. But I had no idea what was going on.
I've been there too. Mira, Estonia's culture is indeed rich and vibrant, but it can be intimidating for foreigners. I once tried to join in on a traditional Estonian dance, and let's just say I was more of a participant than a performer.
Oh my god. I can imagine. But seriously, Estonia has made significant strides in promoting social equality and respect for minorities. Did you know that Estonia has a long tradition of welcoming refugees and offering them a safe haven? Well,
That's amazing. I didn't know that. And it's even more impressive considering Estonia's small size and geographic location. I'm sure it's not always easy to balance the needs of different communities, but it's clear that Estonia is committed to creating a welcoming environment for all.
exactly. And it's not just about government policies. There are also many grassroots initiatives that promote social equality and respect for minorities. For example, I met a group of Estonian youth who were passionate about promoting LGBTQ rights and inclusivity in their community.
That's fantastic. It's great to see young people taking the lead in promoting social change. And I'm sure it's not just Estonia that's making progress. Hungary is also doing its part in promoting social equality and respect for minorities. In fact, Hungary has a rich tradition of folklore and cultural heritage that celebrates its diversity.
That's true. Hungary's cultural heritage is indeed rich and diverse, and it's great to see the country celebrating its minority communities. But I have to say, I was a bit by the lack of diversity in some of the smaller towns I visited in Hungary. It's like, where are all the minorities?
I see what you mean. Yeah. Yes, Hungary does have a relatively homogeneous population, but that's not to say that there aren't any minority communities. In fact, Hungary has a significant Roma population, and there are also many Hungarian communities that are proud of their minority heritage.
That's true. I didn't realize that Hungary had such a significant Roma population. But I'm curious, Leo, have you ever visited any of the Roma communities in Hungary? I'm sure it would be an eye-opening experience.
Actually, I have visited some of the Roma communities in Hungary, and it was indeed an eye-opening experience. The Roma people have a rich cultural heritage, and they're known for their music, dance, and art.
That's amazing. I'm so glad you got to experience that firsthand. And I'm sure our listeners would love to hear more about it. If you think this is wrong, please let us know in the comments.
No, I don't think this is wrong at all. Mira, in fact, I think it's a great opportunity for us to learn more about the Roma community and their cultural heritage. And who knows, maybe we can even learn a thing or two about social equality and respect for minorities.
Exactly. And I'm sure our listeners will appreciate your candidness. So, let's get back to the topic at hand. What do you think is the most important thing that Estonia and Hungary can do to promote social equality and respect for minorities?
That's a great question. Mira, I think one of the most important things that Estonia and Hungary can do is to promote education and awareness about minority cultures and issues. By educating people about the importance of diversity and inclusivity, we can create a more welcoming and accepting environment for all.
That's a great point. Education is key to promoting social equality and respect for minorities. And I'm sure our listeners would agree with you. I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. Do you have any thoughts or experiences to share?
Yes, I do have some thoughts to share. As someone who has lived in both Estonia and Hungary, I can attest to the fact that both countries have made significant progress in promoting social equality and respect for minorities. However, there is still much work to be done, and I think it's essential for us to continue promoting education and awareness about minority cultures and issues.
That's a great point. And I'm sure our listeners will appreciate your honesty. So, let's wrap up this topic by saying that social equality and respect for minorities are essential for creating a harmonious and inclusive society. And I'm sure our listeners will agree with us. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. So, let's dive into taxation in Estonia and Hungary. Both countries have a tax system that's relatively straightforward. But there are some differences. In Estonia, residents are taxed on their worldwide income, while Hungary taxes residents on their Estonian source income only. That's a big difference, right?
Yes. And it's not just about the tax rates, but also the types of taxes that apply. In Estonia, there's a 20% corporate income tax, while Hungary has a 9% corporate income tax. That's a significant difference, and it could make a big impact on business owners and entrepreneurs.
Exactly. And let's talk about tax deductions. In Estonia, there's a standard tax deduction of 9 euros, while in Hungary, it's 450 euros. That's a huge difference, and it can make a big impact on individuals and families.
And what about value-added tax, or VAT? In Estonia, the standard VAT rate is 20%, while in Hungary, it's 27%. That's a big difference, and it could make a big impact on businesses that import and export goods.
Yes. And let's talk about social security contributions. In Estonia, employees contribute 33% of their salary to the Social Security Fund, while in Hungary, it's 28%. That's a significant difference, and it could make a big impact on individuals and families.
And what about pension plans? In Estonia, there's a mandatory pension system, while in Hungary, it's voluntary. That's a big difference, and it could make a big impact on individuals and families who are planning for retirement.
Exactly. And let's talk about healthcare. In Estonia, residents have access to universal healthcare, while in Hungary, it's a more complex system. In Hungary, residents can choose between a public or private healthcare system.
Yes. And what about education? In Estonia, education is free for all residents. While in Hungary, there are some fees for higher education. That's a big difference. And it could make a big impact on individuals and families who are planning for their children's education.
Ah, yes. And let's talk about social safety nets. In Estonia, there's a social safety net that provides support for vulnerable individuals and families. While in Hungary, it's a more complex system. In Hungary, there are some social benefits for vulnerable individuals and families.
Ah, yes. And what about social security benefits? In Estonia, there's a universal pension system, while in Hungary, it's a more complex system. In Hungary, there are some social security benefits for individuals and families, but they vary depending on the individual's situation.
Ah, yes. And let's talk about the overall quality of life. Both Estonia and Hungary have a high standard of living, but there are some differences. In Estonia, there's a strong focus on technology and innovation, while in Hungary, there's a strong focus on culture and history.
Ah, yes. And what about the cost of living? In Estonia, the cost of living is relatively high, while in Hungary, it's lower. That's a big difference. And it can make a big impact on individuals and families who are planning to move to either country.
Ah, yes. And let's talk about the job market. Both Estonia and Hungary have a strong job market, but there are some differences. In Estonia, there's a strong focus on technology and innovation, while in Hungary, there's a strong focus on manufacturing and industry.
Ah, yes. And what about the overall economy? Both Estonia and Hungary have a strong economy, but there are some differences. In Estonia, there's a strong focus on technology and innovation, while in Hungary, there's a strong focus on manufacturing and industry.
Oh, yes. And let's talk about the social rights of long-term immigrants. Both Estonia and Hungary have a system of social rights for long-term immigrants, but there are some differences. In Estonia, there's a system of social rights that includes access to healthcare, education, and social security benefits.
Ah, yes. And what about the tax implications for long-term immigrants? In Estonia, there's a system of tax implications that includes income tax, corporate tax, and VAT. In Hungary, there's a system of tax implications that includes income tax, corporate tax, and VAT, but with some differences.
Ah, yes. And let's talk about the overall process of becoming a long-term immigrant in either country. Both Estonia and Hungary have a system of residency permits, but there are some differences. In Estonia, the process is relatively straightforward, while in Hungary, it's more complex.
Ah, yes. And what about the language requirements? In Estonia, there's a requirement for Estonian language proficiency, while in Hungary, there's a requirement for Hungarian language proficiency.
Ah, yes. And let's talk about the overall experience of living in either country. Both Estonia and Hungary have a unique culture and way of life, but there are some differences. In Estonia, there's a strong focus on technology and innovation, while in Hungary, there's a strong focus on culture and history.
Ah, yes. And what about the overall recommendation for long-term immigrants? Both Estonia and Hungary have their pros and cons, but there are some key differences. In Estonia, there's a strong focus on technology and innovation, while in Hungary, there's a strong focus on culture and history.
Ah, yes. And let's talk about the final thoughts on taxation, retirement, and social rights for long-term immigrants in Estonia and Hungary. Both countries have their unique approach to supporting immigrant residents, but there are some differences.
Ah, yes. And what about the overall takeaway from this conversation? Both Estonia and Hungary have a lot to offer long-term immigrants, but it's essential to understand the differences between the two countries.
Ah, yes. And let's talk about the overall recommendation for our listeners. If you're considering moving to either country, it's essential to do your research and understand the differences between the two countries.
Ah, yes. And what about the final thoughts on this topic? Both Estonia and Hungary have a lot to offer long-term immigrants, but it's essential to understand the differences between the two countries.
Oh, yes. And let's talk about the overall takeaway from this conversation. Both Estonia and Hungary have a unique approach to supporting immigrant residents, but there are some differences. Welcome back to our comparison podcast, where we explore the fascinating differences between two countries. Today, we're focusing on the rate of meeting specific interests in Estonia and Hungary. I'm Miro, and I'm to dive into this topic with my co-host, Leo.
That's right. Mira. And I'm Leo. We're going to take a closer look at how these two countries support and celebrate diverse interests. From niche hobby clubs to specialized events and community engagement, we'll discover what makes each country unique. So, let's get started.
I'm certain that our listeners living in Estonia would agree with me that the country's vibrant cultural scene is a major draw for enthusiasts. From the Tallinn Music Week to the Tartu Festival, there's always something happening in Estonia.
That's true. Mira. And Estonia is also known for its thriving tech scene. The country's capital, Tallinn, is home to a number of startups and tech companies, making it an ideal place for entrepreneurs and innovators to meet and collaborate.
Yes. Estonia's digital infrastructure is one of its strongest assets. I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. Do you think Estonia's digital landscape is a major factor in attracting tech-savvy individuals?
Well, I think it's safe to say that Estonia's digital infrastructure is a major draw for many people. But let's not forget about Hungary's rich cultural heritage. From the stunning architecture of Budapest to the beautiful Lake Balaton, there's no shortage of natural beauty in Hungary.
Absolutely. Leo. And speaking of cultural heritage, I've heard that Hungary has a thriving folk music scene. Are there any specific events or festivals that our listeners should know about?
Yes. The Basso Festival in Hungary is a must-see for anyone interested in folk music and culture. It's a traditional festival that takes place in the town of Szécs, and it's a great opportunity to experience Hungary's rich cultural heritage.
That sounds amazing. Leo, I'm sure our listeners would love to learn more about this festival. And, as we mentioned earlier, Estonia's cultural scene is also thriving. But I'm curious, do you think there are any similarities between Estonia's and Hungary's approaches to supporting specific interests?
Well, Mira, I think that both countries are committed to supporting and celebrating their unique cultural heritage. Whether it's through festivals, events, or community engagement, both countries are making a real effort to promote their diverse interests.
That's a great point. And speaking of community engagement, I've heard that Estonia has a strong tradition of community-led initiatives. Can you tell our listeners a bit more about this?
Yes. Estonia's community-led initiatives are a great example of how the country is supporting specific interests. From community gardens to neighborhood associations, there are many ways for people to get involved and make a difference in their local community.
That's fantastic. Leo, I'm sure our listeners would love to learn more about these initiatives. And as we wrap up this episode, I'd like to ask our listeners a question. What do you think is the key to meeting specific interests in Estonia and Hungary? Do you have any tips or recommendations for our audience?
Well, Mira, I think that the key to meeting specific interests in both countries is to be open-minded and willing to try new things. Whether it's attending a festival, joining a community-led initiative, or simply striking up a conversation with a local, there are many ways to meet new people and explore new interests.
That's great advice. Leo! And as we sign off for now, I'd like to thank our listeners for joining us on this episode. We hope you've enjoyed learning about the rate of meeting specific interests in Estonia and Hungary. Don't forget to follow the Jet Off AI YouTube channel for more episodes like this, and hit that bell icon to catch our videos the moment they drop. We'd love to hear your thoughts and comments below. Reading and responding to them truly brightens our day. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back soon with more.